All right. Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Triumvirate. It looks like we're stuck on our inimitable co-host, Jacob K. Johnson. Uh, he was up there on the screen, and I'm resentful of that because I like to hog the spotlight. I am your host, Goel of Investigations and Ritual Abuse, and I am joined by Justin Riggs of LDS Abuse and Jacob K. Johnson of Rise to Liberty, two of my fellow soldiers in this fight against sexual abuse. I say sexual abuse is all satanic. Other people disagree with me, but I defy you to find non satanic, godly instances of sexual abuse. Be that as it may, I could digress on that all day long, but here today, we're going to talk about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints as a globalist entity advancing the globalist agenda. And uniquely suited to lead that discussion is our co host, Justin Riggs of LDS Abuse, who, as I said earlier, has an ammunition factory for a brain and a Gatling gun for a mouth. So he's going to spew some bullets here in just a second. So, Justin, why don't you take it away in terms of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints, or as I've been calling them lately, the Church of Latter day Satanists? And tell us about the globalist agenda and backdrop of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I believe, like the content I've been following of yours online, ties the beginning of this to the church kind of muzzling Ezra Taft Benson and leaning towards the Rotaries or the
Yeah, for sure.
Rotarians.
Yeah, I mean, you got to go. I mean, you can go all the way back, Goel. I mean, you can go once Joseph Smith died and they went across the country to Salt Lake City. It seems pretty clear to me that Brigham Young had the intent of, they said they went to go to escape Babylon and to build Zion, but the very first thing they did is build a railroad through their backyard up in Ogden. And so that got them in with the Union Pacific Railroad. And that has been in place ever since the days of Brigham Young. Brigham Young was on the board of directors. Dallin Oaks, the current prophet, also was on the board of directors for Union Pacific. So literally from Brigham's time all the way up through Dallin Oaks, they've been a part of that Union Pacific group, which of course is the Bushes and the Harrimans and that kind of group, right? And so I think it really started way back then. But to your point, when it really kicked into gear, in my opinion, is around the time of Heber J. Grant. And then there's sort of this dead period in the research, and then it kicks back up again because Ezra Taft Benson comes on the scene and starts kind of railing against these guys, right? So, real quick, I want to read something about Heber J. Grant because most people don't understand this. But Heber J. Grant, just for a quick background, did not want to be a prophet. He was put up on a table by Heber C. Kimball at a party with a lot of Mormon leadership as a child. And he said, this young boy is going to be a prophet someday. And Heber J. Grant grew up telling his mother, I don't want to be a prophet. I want to be a businessman. And he was especially interested in insurance and baking. Okay. So by the time he comes to church leadership, he's done a bunch of what they call these financial missions, just basically begging for money from people like the Eccles and going back west and going out east to beg for money because the church leaders are constantly in financial trouble and the church is in financially dire straits quite often early in their history. But he sort of wins this big victory. And here's what he says. He says, I went to California with Mr. Farnsworth, chairman of our state defense committee, and other loyal, patriotic men to discuss ways and means in connection with raising money for our government and as chairman of the Liberty Loan Committee for Utah. I said to Mr. Lynch, then governor of the Federal Reserve Bank, I pledge you the absolute loyalty of the people of Utah. I promise to put over any requirement, no matter how much it is, that is placed on the people of Utah on one condition, and that is that you will give us a Federal Reserve branch in Salt Lake City. So this is sort of like, for me, the moment where Heber J. Grant sort of sells the church's soul to the devil, right? All in exchange for a Federal Reserve Bank, because they want to be a part of this sort of global empire of Federal Reserve banks, right? So, in my opinion, that's really where it happens. Then you go all the way up to Ezra Taft Benson, and this sort of strange thing happens. So David O. McKay is the prophet of the church at this time, and you have Ezra Taft Benson on one side, and I'm blanking on the Rotary International president right now. Here, let me look it up while I'm talking. But basically, what happens is Ezra Taft Benson is very well liked and he has a lot of positions. And he wants to be a part of the John Birch Society, which, of course, is a very, very right leaning organization, right?
Not at all
And
globalist.
yeah, and so David O. McKay and Hugh B. Brown and some other church leaders are really uncomfortable with this. And so they kind of put their thumb on Ezra and say, no, like you can't do that and pretend like you're like that you're representing the church. Like you can be a part of this if you want to. You can go give speeches, but you can't connect it to the church in any way, shape, or form. At the very same time, they have another apostle by the name of Richard L. Evans. And most people will know Richard Evans because of the music and the spoken word broadcast. He was the voice of music in the spoken word for a very long time. But in addition to that, he was also in Rotary International. And I do a whole 2 hour presentation. People can go on YouTube and look me up on the Occult Rejects, where I do this presentation showing that literally every leader in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has close ties to Rotary International. And what you'll find is there's a newspaper article where David O. McKay says, I would very much like to see Richard L. Evans become the president of Rotary International. Okay. Now, so he just puts his thumb on the scales just a little bit, right? He tells Ezra, no John Birch Society, but he says to the whole world, I would love Richard L. Evans to become president of Rotary International. So what most people don't understand is that Rotary International is like the lapdog of the United Nations. Okay. And again, I usually do a presentation about this, so I'm just going to do it from memory here. But the way this works is that once the United Nations is created, one of the very first things they do is the Rotary International sends out a flyer to every club in the world that is Rotary International and says, how can we support the United Nations in their goals? Okay. And that's never changed. From that moment forward, the Rotary International is really been the United Nations lapdog. And I have a friend on X who talks about like local influence but global reach, and that's really the purpose of Rotary International. Okay,
It's also the
so
purpose of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, local influence, global reach, absolutely. And again, I think that's something what a lot of people don't realize about the church is that it has a political side to it that kind of went underground after Joseph Smith died, but I don't think it ever really went away. You had this Council of the 50, and the whole purpose of that was to anoint Joseph as king of the world, right? And they did that. And I don't personally think that ever really went away. I think they're just sort of biding their time. It's like Brad Wilcox says, like in they don't talk about this very openly, but Brad Wilcox says a lot of things he shouldn't say. And so he gets up and he says, hey, the rest of the world is playing church, but we're the only ones who are really doing it, right? And so in a Mormon mind, especially in a Mormon leadership mind, in the end, this is all going to be a political kingdom in addition to an ecclesiastical structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so I just think that that moment in time, I think those 2 moments in time when Heber J. Grant sort of sells the church's soul and pledges undying loyalty to this group of people for the Federal Reserve Branch, and then this other moment with David O. McKay, where he puts his thumbs on the scales and says, "We're going to head a little bit leftward." That ends you up with things like the Ballard Center for Social Justice at Brigham Young University, right? And then, of course, the church. If Rotary International is the United Nations lapdog, like the church is not far behind. These are two of the only organizations that have literal like days dedicated to them, UN like days that are dedicated to their organizations. And so this is just sort of where we find ourselves, and we see it all over the church. So I'll stop there and I'll let other people jump in, but that's sort of a background about how we got here.
What are your thoughts, Jacob?
As far as their connection to the New World Order, or just kind of in general.
Either or both.
Well, I mean, so one opinion I have about all of this is I really do think that this was set in motion a long time ago. Um, I mean, at one point in time, so the Utah was the focus for the connection of East versus West. That was 1869, and then what's kind of interesting is 1969, the internet was turned on, which was ARPANET back then. It was a DARPA program, and Utah was one of the very first connected systems. And so it kind of seems like Utah has always been at the center of these major pushes towards uh, basically connecting the entire world. And of course, it's sold to us as like this is going to be the future. It's going to be grand and wonderful. But as we move into this, I guess what is dubbed the fourth industrial revolution, which is really like a technology takeover. We start seeing things like flock security cameras everywhere, which is about the scariest thing ever. I mean, this is how they're going to introduce the social credit system, and just the very fact that Utah seems to be at the center of all of this, even though anyone outside of Utah, like they don't really think about Utah. It's considered a flyover state. But in my opinion, it's probably the most important state that everyone should be paying attention to, because this is the state that's leading the world basically, in all of these forward thinking, very liberal ideas of a new world order. Um,
Yeah,
now,
Jacob, just to back up what you're saying there, like what people don't realize is like nobody's ever even heard of Camp Kearns, right? But Camp
right,
Kearns was during the war was the third biggest city in Utah.
right,
Okay. And the reason that they put Camp Kearns where they did is because it's equidistant to three port cities on the West Coast. Okay. And so it gives you access to these three port cities, but it also puts you inland where you're not going to get a surprise attack like you did at Pearl Harbor or something like that.
right,
But geopolitically, like Utah and Colorado both, but Utah, I think especially because Utah has been more open to letting the military industrial complex into their backyard, is one of the most important geopolitical locations in the United States, right?
right.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, it makes sense militarily, which is why we have Dugway Proving Grounds, which is why we have Hill Air Force Base. I mean, the two largest employers in the state of Utah are the military industrial complex and the IRS. I mean, that's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Um, but it seems like we have always been at the forefront of pushing some of this, you know, technological leaps forward. Um, there's been all sorts of things where we have been in the at the head of the pack, I guess is a good way to put it, when it comes to these social leaps forward. And it always seems to be led by some of the worst people. I mean, uh, I don't condone what he did. However, Ted Kaczynski, his criticisms were very accurate. Um, and some of the things that he brought up were all centered here in Utah.
Hmm.
So I find that incredibly interesting that most of the criticisms he had dealt with Utah specifically, mainly the colleges, because they've got some incredible technological advances that are moving forward, particularly the U of U and BYU both have had really like major contributions to this fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah, the Iron Institute in particular, I think, was really a key
Right.
focus, for a lot of
Uh,
people. So yeah, I agree. I mean, what do you
Explain
think?
to our viewers what the Iring Institute is.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert in this area, Goel, but basically, the Iron Institute was like like how would you describe this? It was a place where government could contract through the university legally in order to work on projects that were a priority for them. Okay. And so you're going to see a lot of, like, because of Hill Air Force Base and that kind of thing, you're going to see a lot of aeronautics coming out of Iron Institute and that kind of thing. And so I think the key thing though is it's that interface between government and university, right? And nobody on campus really knows about the Hiring Institute. It's sort of, tucked away, hidden away. I was there at BYU for several years and never even heard of the place. It took coming out of BYU and doing research to learn of this kind of thing. Same thing with the Ballard Center for Social Justice. There's just sort of these pockets set up on campus that have grown and grown to the point where now you're seeing a lot of Mormon parents having concerns about sending their kids over to BYU because of the way that the campus has changed, right? And of course, you have Jeffrey R. Holland's famous whatever that talk was about, um, the campus going too far left, sort of thing. I don't remember exactly what it was called, but so this is not an issue that only a few people are looking at. Even the Brethren are aware of what's going. At least some of the Brethren are aware of going on. Of course, other of the Brethren, like Garrett Gong, who was counsel on foreign relations, probably doesn't care all that much, right? He probably sees it as a net positive for the church to internationalize and be a part of these groups like the United Nations, which is just sort of uncomfortable because on one hand you have a former prophet, Ezra Taft Benson, calling the United Nations a Satanist, like they're a satanic organization, and now all of a sudden you have a church that is completely in bed with the same organization. So who do you listen to? And of course, in the church, the answer is always, well, dead prophets' words don't count as much as living prophets. And so people just sort of compartmentalize that, right?
Yeah.
And they just like
Trust the
whatever
living
Ezra Taft
prophet.
Benson said is gone. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's basically in Latter-day Saint culture, the issue here that makes Latter-day Saints appealing to globalists is you're culturally conditioned from the time you're born into the church to conform and to obey a top-down authoritarian model, which makes you an ideal global citizen in this United Nations World Economic Forum paradigm because you're already conditioned into compliance with whatever. That is why Latter-day Saints were some of the earliest and also highest percentage adopters of the COVID vaccine because they trusted their living prophet. They believed their living prophet and their apostles when they said that those so-called vaccines, which were actually mRNA therapies, not vaccines at all,
Yeah.
they believed their leadership on that point as it pertains to any number of other factors. The infrastructure for globalism has been built over decades. And so what you've seen is the one hope that we have as ordinary citizens is the government builds haystacks to find needles. And they're doing that with their mass surveillance. They're doing that with the infrastructure that they built from Echelon on. That's one of the NSA mass surveillance programs early on. They called it Thin Thread. That was that was a search method that lost out in competitions within the NSA in terms of distilling down information, making it easier to find in the global war on terror, which ultimately was just a pretext for what they're doing. It was an excuse for the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act to build an infrastructure that they could then turn against their own citizens and they could use as a pretext to monitor their own citizens in the name of security. So what you're seeing is we've already had a social credit system in this country for at least since the 1980s. It's called a FICO score. What most Americans don't realize is that before the 1980s, we were fine without credit monitoring agencies. We were fine without a credit score. We were fine without all of that information being centralized across three major credit reporting agencies, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. What you have to realize is that that's a component. They couldn't rate you based on your social conformity or behavior at that time. They're deploying that now, and we've seen that in politicians like Obama pressuring banks to debank certain industries that they didn't like, such as gun dealers and so on and so forth. We're seeing it with private citizens suddenly having their banking accounts withdrawn and shut down. I don't like Nick Fuentes, But what they did to him in terms of like confiscating $500,000 of his money through the FBI, he didn't commit any crimes. He hadn't been convicted of anything, but they basically seized his bank account, and they can do that to anybody,
100%.
anybody,
Yeah.
and that's what most Americans don't realize until it happens to them. If you look at what happened to Alex Jones basically said he didn't believe Sandy Hook was anything other than a false flag. He exercised his First Amendment right. He was then sued for defamation, and they issued a $1 billion plus judgment against him. Now, what's the actual harm to the parents of those Sandy Hook kids in terms of Alex Jones saying he doesn't believe it was anything other than a false flag? What's the actual harm? They've already lost their children. Like, what more can you do? And besides, it's Alex Jones. Let's be fucking real here.
Right.
Like, this is a
Yeah.
guy who peddles his little,
Turning the
male
frogs
vitality.
gay, right?
Yeah, his little atrazine in the water. He's been right more times than I care to admit. Uh,
Right.
some of the stuff that he said, like, he was right at the time, and I knew he was right at the time for personal, firsthand experience. In terms of one of the things that he said was that they were doing experiments at the University of Washington, and they were shutting people's hearts down so that those people could communicate with extra dimensional entities.
Hmm.
Well, I had a line to somebody who was part of that, who said that to me, a couple of years before. Actually, and that person explicitly named Bill Gates as being part of those experiments. And the allegation was that they were using that contact while people were clinically dead, to obtain information from these entities that they then use for technology and technological advances. Now, when my buddy brought that to my attention, I knew him from some circles that I used to run in. It was like, that's fascinating, but it's also bullshit. And lo and behold, here comes Alex Jones, a couple of years down the line, and says the exact same thing. I think he repeated it on Joe Rogan, the little episode he had where he said, I'm going to be real honest with you. I'm kind of retarded. And I'm like, that's one of the few things that you said to me that I really fucking agree with. But he has been right so many times. And honestly, this Epstein file stuff, Alex Jones is looking pretty prescient, or he's looking like an inside agent who got fed a lot of information in advance, and he floated that out there. One of the reasons I really hate that guy is because when I lived in Austin, Texas, he used to drive around in his big, like, Humvee style vehicle.
His
And he
troop
used to,
transport.
yeah, his little, I don't even know what you'd call it. It was a monstrosity, probably got like 6 miles to the gallon. But he would drive through downtown Austin. I'd be sitting on the sidewalk enjoying my little drink or whatever, and just chilling. And here comes Alex Jones in his big gas hog vehicle, screaming over a loudspeaker as he drives by, or whoever's driving him is driving by. And he's like, "There's a war for your mind. Oh, the Satanists are taking over. The frogs are freaking gay." It's just whatever stream of consciousness nonsense. And I really fucking hate that guy. I'm trying to just have a nice, quiet moment in downtown Austin, and he's driving by in his little armored personnel carrier and screaming over the microphone. I hated that guy. I hate him now, you know. But the thing of it is, as I said, he's been right more times than I care to admit. And when it came to the New World Order and the globalist and everything that we found out about those guys in the Epstein files that have been released, he was absolutely 100% right, which means that he just is either prophetic or he was being fed information. I've always thought he was a plant in the movement,
Yeah.
which I used to be
Yep.
pretty strongly a part of. I just something about him just didn't jive with me.
Yeah.
Well,
I believe he's a disinfo agent for sure.
so
So
what's interesting about this to me, guys, is like, why has Alex Jones never talked about the Mormons, right? If
or
he
Sam.
is that, if he is an intelligence asset, why, like, Mormons are a target of all kinds of conspiracy theories. And
Right.
yet, the biggest conspiracy theorist of all has never really talked about the Mormons. And of course, this goes back to, when I first
Because
started doing my research and we found this document of the CIA being up at Brigham Young University, meeting with what they call the elders of the church. So you're talking about some of the brethren who are sitting on the BYU council, right? Because they run that university. And in the document right there, it says the church formally endorsed our mission, and they're going to go back and they're going to talk about this because they're concerned that if it becomes known what we're doing with them, that it would affect the image of the church. Okay. And so, like, I look at it and I don't know much about Alex Jones. I actually never really got into that whole scene. But what I know is that, like, this group of people who are the target of basically every conspiracy theorist out there never gets mentioned on the biggest conspiracy theory show ever, right? Which to me leads to the conclusion that potentially there's a blanket of protection over this group of people, which makes a lot of sense when you start putting all the pieces of history together, right? And I want to go back to something you were talking about, Goel, when you mentioned the COVID vaccine. That's an important part of the Rotary International story because obviously the prophet who told everybody to go get the literal godsend, quote unquote, was Russell M. Nelson. Well, Russell M. Nelson's father, Marion Clavar Nelson, was the president of Salt Lake City's Rotary International Club, right during the time of World War
Mhm.
II. Okay.
And he wasn't a
So
Latter-day Saint either, was he?
yeah, he was, but he was inactive. And then eventually, like right before he died, they got sealed together. And this is one of the
Mm.
stories that President Nelson would tell. It's one of the happiest days of his life was when his dad and his mom decided to get sealed in the temple to the family. And so, but the thing that people don't realize is you got to remember if we go back to Grant, okay, Grant was selling war bonds. That's exactly what Marion Clavar Nelson was doing. And so there's sort of this direct line. The other thing that people don't understand is that Russell Nelson's brother was involved with Utah politics with Jacob. You may have to remind me. Is it what's the governor's name that started with an R? Ramp?
Oh,
Reed Smoot?
No, no. Last name
No,
started with an
that's a
R. I'll find it.
senator.
yeah.
Yeah. So, but the thing is that this family was very connected, and people think that Russell M. Nelson kind of came out of nowhere, but he didn't come out of nowhere. His dad was one of the most politically connected people um, in the world or in the state. So you could go back and look at the at the newspapers, and Russell M. Nelson's father was one of the few people that every single year you can find a "Happy Birthday, Marion Clavar Nelson" announcement in the Salt Lake Tribune. Okay. So this wasn't some small family where this kid was born to this inactive mother and father and nobody knew about him. But because he was so incredibly righteous, he found his way into Skull and Bones. Well, supposedly into Skull and Bones. That's a whole nother story.
Are you talking about
You mean
Cal
he
Rampton?
forged?
Yeah, Rampton. Yeah. Yep. And so Nelson's brother was involved with Rampton. Okay. And so people just don't like because one of the things in Mormonism is that you're just fed only what they want you to see. It's this correlated curriculum, right? Which includes their history. Their part of their curriculum is their history. And
Mhm.
so you only hear what they want you to hear. But when you actually go back and look at the history, is you see that this is all very well organized. Nobody comes out of left field and all of a sudden gains power, influence, right? Or gain in Utah unless they're a part of this grant, what I call the Grantite network, because that's really where it started for me is with Grant,
Right.
because they just needed to get out of financial trouble, and so Grant turned it into a business, and they struggled after that. And then it was Tanner that really put them on the right track. He came down from Canada, right? He had been involved in the oil business up in Canada and came down and really put the church on on a path of financial stability. But
So
this,
before you go any further, who is Tanner?
yeah. So Tanner was up in Alberta, Canada, I want to say, and He was a school teacher of all things. In fact, he taught my great uncle Heber Woolsey in school, and then somehow got involved in local politics, and then somehow got involved in this huge transcontinental. So we have the transcontinental railroad down here in the United States. Up there, they had a transcontinental oil pipeline, and somehow he gets involved in that. And of course, it works out really well. And everything that I've seen about this guy, I've researched him. I research all the church leaders when I come across the name. He was called like Mr. Integrity, and I've never found anything to suggest otherwise with this guy. But what happens is the church then sucks him into Salt Lake, brings him down, and he's the one who starts getting the church onto sort of financial. Like the church was way overextended, right, in the whole real estate world. They were way overextended. They had way too much debt. They didn't have enough assets. And Tanner is the one that really sort of put them on the path to financial prosperity. So they've never really struggled ever since he was a part of the first presidency. So
So
Interesting.
yeah, it is interesting. And to go back a little bit, I think the reason Alex Jones doesn't mention Mormons is the same reason other people don't mention Mormons. It's because by and large, Mormons do tend to come out of left field and they do tend to fly under the radar. Anybody who meets them, like the impression that they get is that they're almost polite to the point of being artificially polite. Um, if you look at what I call general conference speak, I think some other people call it that too. The cadence is almost identical across all of the speakers. It isn't natural, but it is clearly
sure.
something that they stage. And as you put it in the Grantite Club, it's all encompassing,
Yeah.
360 degrees. It is your demeanor, your cadence, the way that you speak, the way that you come across. It's very rehearsed, it's very polished, almost to the
Well,
point of
that's
being.
Beverly Bruff Campbell, right? So if people don't know about Beverly Bruff Campbell, you really got to understand. Beverly Bruff Campbell ran a bunch of charm schools, okay, through what was the Woolworths? Is that the place that went out of business? But
Yeah.
Yeah.
they had charm schools, and then the church brought her in to do media training for church leadership. So that image that you see, it's not an accident. That's Beverly Bruff Campbell, who was also a globalist. Okay. She had Saudi Arabian investors that were giving her money to buy land in Virginia. That's in her memoirs. Okay. So, yeah, like nothing here is random. That's, I think, the biggest thing that people just don't understand is that they think that there's sort of this divine current that has picked up the church and taken it along this path. And wow, look at us. We've prospered because God is prospering us. What they forget is that we're in Satan's kingdom. Okay. So when you're prospering in Satan's kingdom, it might be because you have members of your church in the CIA developing torture programs like Bruce Jessen, right? It might be because you formally endorse the mission of the Central Intelligence Agency. It might be because you invest in pharmakia. It might be because you invest in with the endless gods of war. It might be because you let them build a railroad through the back of your yard. It might be because you got involved in the global sugar industry, right? And so there's just this
You
disconnect between
have,
what a Mormon believes their history is and what actual history shows.
Jacob, you were about to say something?
yeah, just like at the turn of the 20th century, when the church was in like massive amounts of debt, they were renting all sorts of real estate to brothels, like openly.
Right.
And then even after they were out of debt, they continued to rent these properties and fully knowing exactly what they were. They were out of debt because that was the excuse is we were in debt, we needed the money, and then they were out of debt and continued to rent to the brothels. So,
Yeah,
it's this is not something that is just coming up in the church. It's something that the church has almost always done.
Yes,
sure. And
and
it's an
what
open
people,
question. Oh, go ahead, go up. Go ahead.
yeah, what people don't want to comprehend is it's an institution masquerading as a church. It's a hedge fund masquerading as a church, basically, and
Right.
they have $250 billion in assets at least. And part of the reason they were so adamant that members get the COVID vaccine is I guarantee you they had investments in Pfizer and Moderna,
Mm-hmm. I would
and
not be surprised.
they stood to make billions off of those investments. Um, and they were willing to let their membership be guinea pigs um, for these mRNA therapies that had failed in every prior trial. They never made it to a human trial because the animal trials were so bad for these drugs for at least a decade before. You're looking at a situation where these therapies didn't work, and all the problems that you're seeing in human subjects, in terms of miscarriages, in terms of infertility, in terms of cancer, in terms of myocarditis, those were already documented problems with mRNA therapies at the level of animal trials, which is why those trials were discontinued and those drugs never made it to market. Like, at the end of the day, the church let its members join the ranks of the 5.5 billion people on this planet who had at least one injection of those experimental drugs. And they were experimental drugs, they were emergency use authorization, and they did not disclose the presence of graphene in those drugs. They did not disclose the presence of any number of other substances that were in those drugs. Certainly didn't do anything in terms of like the manufacturing issues with quality control, such as the Johnson and Johnson viral vector vaccine. They had to shut down entire manufacturing plants as a result of that because there was contamination. At the end of the day, the church did that to make money. And its current membership and everyone around it needs to realize the church is a money making entity. That is its primary focus. It isn't ecclesiastical. The church is selling you access to its temples in the form of a 10% contribution, a 10% tithe of your income, because it is using the surplus of that, which is about $2 billion a year at least, to build its investment portfolio.
Right.
That's what the church is. And so when you talk about the church as a globalist entity, guess what all the other globalist entities are concerned with? Centralizing power to make money. At the end of the
Sure.
day, they're the richest 10% in this country own 90% of the stocks. Like, they control an inordinate amount of the wealth. And everyone thinks, oh, it's terrible that they have to bear so much of the tax burden, over half. But they control somewhere between 80 and 90% of all wealth. So this idea that they would be concerned about anything other than consolidation of their power is a joke. What we have in this situation is what we have in this country is a situation where 1.05% of the population funds over 78% of the political campaign donations. That
Mhm.
is to the candidates themselves, or to PACs, or to 501(c)s that are active in the political process, or the political advocacy process. Those are the people that fund it. It's under it's 1.05% of the population that controls political outcomes in this country, because we are a country not of one man, one vote, but of $1, one vote. And you vote based on the media outlets that they control and they own as members of the shareholder class telling you how to vote. The same way that you would vote, say, if you're a Latter day Saint and the first presidency issues a statement indicating which way you should go on a political issue. To the point that you made earlier, Justin, in terms of the church being involved in politics in the state of Utah, the reality of it is there was proposed legislation, to strip eligibility for public benefits in the state of Utah for illegal immigrants. That legislation was killed by the Quorum of the 12 in the first presidency. They were the ones who told legislators not to pass that legislation. And think about how extraordinary that is. That is a nonprofit entity that has nonprofit tax exempt status, in part because they're not supposed to participate in politics. And they're telling legislators how to vote. And culturally, what most people in the wider population don't realize is that every Latter day Saint, every endowed Latter day Saint, takes an oath for the law of consecration. They pledge their time, talents, and whatever else the Lord has blessed them with. And so when you see things like Oscar McConkie showing up to court in an abuse case, and the judge saying in that case to the other side's lawyers, we are going to do exactly whatever Mr. McConkie says. That's the level in this state of the church's influence. That's the level. Latter-day Saints aren't Americans. They aren't Utahns. Okay, they're going to do what their church says because that's part of the oath that they take for the law of consecration. That's the danger here. You don't have a secular society in Utah. Your legislators who are active Mormons, they're going to keep that oath. And in some cases, that oath is going to interfere with law enforcement. There's a man named Brandon Crane who used to be the ASAC of HSI, and he, at the time, was just a regular special agent. And at the time when HSI was investigating the Hamlin allegations, along with the Badsguard allegations and a Canadian sex trafficking case, and he found out that Noel Ingalls, who was an analyst, and Adam Kinnaman, who was a special agent, they were the ones tasked with investigating the Hamlin allegations. They were the ones who came across David Levitt for child trafficking, the adoption of Alessandra Fishing Hawk. They got the bright idea because some of their victims were telling them, we did call the hotline and report our abuse. They wanted to subpoena the records of that hotline. And Brandon Crane hit the roof. He went to Steve Andres, then the acting ASAC for HSI, and he basically lobbied Andres to pull the assistant U.S. attorney from the case that they were working with. Steve Andres used his influence and his pull with the assistant U.S. attorney's office to pull that prosecutor. And without a prosecutor assigned to your case, you don't get to go to court and pull warrants and subpoenas. You don't get to do that. You're done. COVID had hit. Travel was off the table, so they couldn't travel to visit witnesses. And then in August of 2020, they were pulled off of that case. And ultimately, Kinnaman winds up in San Angelo, Texas, handling immigration cases. Noel Ingalls had an OPC complaint that went nowhere filed against him for misuse of a government computer. OPC tried to refer that out to two assistant U.S. attorneys that I am aware of to prosecute Noel Ingalls in retaliation after he filed a whistleblower complaint. And both AUSAs, both assistant U.S. attorneys, rejected. They declined to prosecute Noel Ingalls, which should tell you exactly how much merit that complaint had. But that's the level. Brandon Crane was a true blue Mormon by all accounts. He is no longer with HSI because under his tenure and under his supervision, two HSI agents were running a trafficking ring for bath salts. They were using a CI, a confidential informant, to sell bath salts.
Mm,
And they made six figures doing it before they were caught.
wow.
And Brandon Crane lost his job. That's the problem with having true blue Mormons in positions of power. Their loyalty is never to the law or the Constitution. It is to what is in the best interest of the church. And if the church is exposed, the church doesn't have to tell them what to do or how to act. They're going to do it of their own volition because they know the playbook.
Yeah,
And
it's the perfect example of soft power, right? I mean,
yes,
especially in Utah, but everywhere. I mean, the one of the fascinating things about going and reading the David O. McKay journals is you'll often see men coming to the prophet saying, "Hey, I would like to run for sheriff of this particular town. What do you think, President McKay?" Or I would like to run for this office, or I would like to, and like President McKay is supposed to be the prophet of the church, but what he's really doing is he's guiding and directing these men as to whether or not they should run for political office. And so this whole thing about the church not being involved in politics is the biggest bunch of hogwash like that they put out, right?
bullshit.
Yeah.
It's complete and utter bullshit. If it stinks in here right now, It's because we're talking about some bullshit. The idea that the church is apolitical.
Well, they have
And
lobbyists. They hire
Mhm.
lobbyists, both in Utah
yes,
and in
That's
Washington,
correct.
D.C.,
So
right?
when I ran for office, it was for a state level office. I actually had a few of them approach me on Capitol Hill. So, you
Really?
know, oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
tell us about that
So,
story.
yeah.
I mean, there's not a whole lot to tell, honestly. I mean, I just spent a lot of time up on Capitol Hill. So for those who don't know, I was involved in third party politics pretty extensively. I was the chair of the Weber County Libertarian Party, also the communications director for the Utah Libertarian Party, also involved in the Mises Caucus, a bunch of different things. And I ran for office twice. I ran for District 9 for State House because it's a tiny, tiny little district. I mean, you only need 10,000 votes to win, depending on voter turnout. And so I ran the first time and yeah, spent quite a bit of time up on Capitol Hill and had a few people approach me who claimed to be lobbyists. Like, granted, they could have been anybody. They were clearly Mormons. They didn't have to say that they were, but I felt a little strange because they had pulled or at least known that my records are still with the church because I've never removed my records.
Hmm.
And they knew that, I
Is he
was,
allowed to be on the podcast if he still has his records in the church, Goel? Or do we need
No,
to?
he's allowed to be on
Is
the
that allowed?
podcast. Not everybody can be as badass as you and be ex-con.
right, right. So,
It's
but yeah, they approached me and they were just, you know, asking how the campaign was going and everything. And they had noticed that I was a member of the church, which I thought was weird. It's like, how would you know that unless you pulled my name or something? And so I assume that anyone that runs for office is as soon as they, have a list of everyone that's running or everyone that is currently holding office, they probably check it against church records. So that's my guess anyways. But yeah, it
yeah.
was kind of odd. So
I
That's
withdrew
weird.
my records, or at least I tried to. I haven't received confirmation from Quit Mormon yet, but my understanding is they have a pretty severe backlog.
mm,
Um, because there are a lot
no
of
doubt.
people who are disgusted with the church.
Right.
Um, so I mean, ultimately, that's what makes a Mormon an ideal global citizen from the perspective
Well,
of a
let's
globalist.
talk about that idea of a global citizen real quick too, Goel. I
Mhm.
mean, like one of the things that really shook me out of my slumber was when President Nelson got up and used those words. Because like let's be really clear about this, right?
I
Like,
knew you were going to take off on this. That's the
well,
reason
it just
I
doesn't make
said it.
sense. Look, I mean, I studied political science at BYU. Okay, I was an international studies major then. Then I went to graduate school for public policy. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about government and particularly the problems of governing men, right? Because humankind is the most ungovernable thing on the face of the planet. So um, when when President Nelson stands up and uses this term "good global citizens," it about knocked me out of my chair because there's just no such thing. There is no global polity, right, to be a global citizen of. And
Right.
President Nelson is an educated man,
Say
right? He's a
polity again.
cosmopolitan man. He's been all around the world. He knows, like
Say
he
say
knows.
say polity again. I mean, how many people use that in conversation? Talk millions of words.
I do it. Sorry, but so like it just
Cheers, my non-alcoholic Guinness.
non-alcoholic Guinness. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that a Mormon prophet whose life is governed by lawyers and risk management professionals, right? Who knows that there's no such thing as a global society, right? Now I'm nervous about using the word polity, but there's no such thing. And so he's using this term good global citizen, and there's a reason for it. Okay. And I think we really dodged a bullet. And this is very much conspiracy theory. But I mean, I think that whole COVID thing fell flat on its face. I think it was meant to push the agenda further, like much further ahead than to where they got. But what you see is a Mormon prophet who's willing to play the game of the globalists by using terms like good global citizen, which is very much like the term satanic panic, in that neither of them really exist, right? And
No,
so,
the one thing you can count on with globalists is that they're too incompetent to execute their bullshit plans. The
I
problem
hope.
with COVID, in my opinion, is that ultimately it discredited public health. There's a lot of good things about public health. Um, on some level, polio has been eradicated. On some level, measles and mumps and rubella, they're no longer, you know, killing school children at the rate that they used to be.
Yeah.
There is some validity to vaccination. Now, should kids have 34 or more vaccines at any given time, like over a vaccine schedule? No. It's clearly being ginned up. You've heard the term regulatory capture, where the companies that are supposed to be regulated by an agency capture the agency through corruption. Well, that's happening in our scientific community as well, because all of the scientific research is funded by these corporations who stand to benefit tremendously um, if they can use science, as it were, their funded science, which arrives at their desired outcomes. Um, they can use that to compel the government to move in a regulatory manner to mandate more vaccines for children. And RFK is another guy I don't particularly like any more than I like Alex Jones. But you know what? He's absolutely right to say that when he was coming up, autism had an incidence rate of 1 in 10,000, and now it's 1 in 34.
Yeah.
And over the course of that time, whether it's causal or not, the correlation is we expanded our vaccine schedule tremendously, exponentially, actually.
So
And
there's
yeah,
actually two terms that people need to be familiar with when it comes to this topic specifically. And the first one is junk science. Junk science is something that happens all the time, and what it is it's science that was bought and paid for, usually by somebody with a very particular motive. And what it really is that it is basically fake science. It's science that is used to justify a particular outcome, but it's not actual science. It's just manipulated data. You can look towards things like the scientific studies that came out
The food
declaring,
pyramid. The
yeah, the
food
food
pyramid.
pyramid, that smoking was safe, asbestos was fine, there sugar's okay for you. You know, like there's all sorts of junk science all over the place, and it happens all the time. Now, the second term that people really need to understand when it comes to this, you know, the healthcare industry, and particularly the regulations, it's called GRAS, generally recognized as safe. Now, this happens with the food and with our medicine. GRAS is a standard for regulation. Is like basically if a pharmaceutical industry or pharmaceutical company has a really good track record with the FDA, say, then the FDA is going to consider them GRAS. That whatever science they turn in for a new medication, it's considered GRAS, generally recognized as safe. So therefore, they don't have to go through the normal process of getting approved by the FDA. They pretty much just rubber stamp it.
Hmm.
So it's basically a way for them to get through the regulatory process so much quicker than before, and they never test anything. And then they
yeah,
turn
and
around and have the 1-800 bad drug commercials. If you were harmed by a drug, call this lawyer today, you know?
it's not like our regulatory process on food and drugs is anything other than a massive joke. I mean, more
Mm-hmm.
people die every year from using federally approved drugs as
Right.
directed than the number of deaths associated with illicit drugs. So
Correct.
your legal
Wow.
prescription and over the counter drugs, they're killing more people every year when used as directed than illicit drugs like methamphetamines.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
So,
I'm not saying we shouldn't deregulate or legalize all drugs or anything like that. I don't want anybody to think that. But I am saying that we have a significant problem with our legal drugs in the regulatory process that's used to vet and approve them. And what
Right.
Jacob just highlighted is emblematic of that.
So
They
going back and
create
tying this,
not cures.
yeah.
Yeah.
So tying this back to sort of the idea of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as a globalist organization, I would really challenge anybody who ever watches this to go read Rotary International's policy on vaccination, okay, and realize that it's one of the major drivers of those clubs is to vaccinate. Then go read the Mormon Church's handbook, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints general handbook, and realize that for whatever reason, an ecclesiastical organization has decided to take a formal position on vaccination. Okay. So, which just doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, vaccination is not a moral or ethical or ecclesiastical issue that needs to be addressed in a general church handbook. And yet, because of the church's ties to these globalist organizations, they've tipped their hand here by putting a policy in their handbook being very pro-vaccine, right? And we know that they contribute a lot of money to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which of course is the group that has poisoned tens of thousands of Africans, right, doing test vaccines and stuff like that. So there are these tells, right? I think the other tell, Goel, is something that you brought up earlier, which is the abuse. Like, where you can see most clearly that the church is a financial organization and not so much an ecclesiastical organization anymore, at least at the higher levels, right? And we always want to distinguish between the local congregations and the spiritual body, which still is very much an ecclesiastical organization, versus sort of this layer, that the corporation that is supposed to be interfacing for the spiritual body with civil society, but really has latched itself on as a parasite and taken over operations of the spiritual body itself. Okay. So, but what you're going to see is that in a church, you would invite every abused person to come and heal through the power and atonement of Jesus Christ. You wouldn't avoid abuse victims and avoid abuse cases, or shirk away from it, or try to find legal loopholes for reasons not to help abuse victims. As representatives of Jesus Christ, you would be inviting every abuse victim to come into your pews every single Sunday and receive the healing that can come through the atonement of Jesus Christ. But what you see from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is an organization that will do anything and everything to make sure that nobody understands the nature and scope of the abuse problem inside of their organization, nor will they call and seek for those outside of their organization to come and receive healing. The only thing that they're concerned about is their image and assets, right? That's the only thing that they care about. And so, like, these are the tells. These are the things, and like, for, probably not many church members watch this, but like, you look at, like, everybody's always on a sliding scale of apostasy, and you have to just sort of locate yourself on that scale. None of us are good. None of us are fully righteous. So where am I on this scale of apostasy? And it's things like abuse. It's things like vaccines. It's things like the investments. It's things like um, being in bed with the military industrial complex that I think people need to think about carefully when they're trying to place the church on an apostasy scale right now.
Yeah. And to that end, I think this is a perfect time to put on this recent excerpt from an article covering the LDS lawsuit, in which the plaintiffs are arguing that the internal policies of the church, that they have a zero tolerance level for abuse, um, and their official policy is to report the abuse to civil authorities. Um, in reality, the church is arguing, well, that doesn't rise to the level of imposing a legal duty on us because we have this internal policy here. In actual practice, the church, through its hotline, which goes straight to Kurt McConkie, its law firm, A, discourages bishops and stake presidents and whoever else who is an officer of the church from reporting to outside civil authorities. That's been the practice, and it continues to be the practice. If they aren't obligated under state law to report the abuse, if there's a priest penitent privilege in place, they aren't going to report the abuse. And what's worse is you say that as disciples of Jesus Christ and everything else, we would encourage the victim to heal through the ecclesiastical process. Well, that's not being done. The church does provide counseling and therapy for perpetrators so that they can be rebaptized in a year or so's time. And they can get their temple recommends back. And eventually, if they do have a notation on their membership record, like Wade Christofferson did, he can meet with an area representative as a perpetrator, as someone who's raped kids, and he can have that notation removed from his membership record so that nobody later on down the road at a different ward or stake is aware of his propensity to rape kids. And so he basically is in one calling after another where he has access to children. He's part of, I believe, a bishopric of a YSA ward that puts him in proximity to children and gives him access to younger people. And guess what? He continues to abuse children. It's the same thing that would happen with Christopher Michael Jensen in West Virginia. I mean, this is a boy who, at 13 years of age, was convicted of forcible sexual abuse. Like, he was convicted of sexually assaulting two of his female classmates as a 13-year-old. And his grandfather, who was an officer in the church who had presided over the church's global facilities, used his influence as a church employee of very high rank and who had tremendous connections within the church leadership to secure a lesser plea agreement. That's the allegation for his 13-year-old grandson who was already a sexual predator.
Sure.
And
Well, remember, D. Todd Christofferson is Wade Christofferson's brother, who's,
yeah, and he's part
D.
of the
Todd
first
Christofferson is
presidency.
now in the first presidency, but at the time we know that he knew since 2020. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now the
That's
church's
what he
official,
admits to.
yeah, right. And the church's official statement on this is that, well, the victims that came to D. Todd Christofferson were adults and they didn't want D. Todd Christofferson to do anything. Well, like, my answer to that is, who cares? D. Todd Christofferson left children, including children in his own extended family, as far as we know right now, right? Because nobody's going to admit that D. Todd Christofferson took that information and went to his family and said, hey guys, I just found out something really disturbing about Wade. Keep your kids safe. Okay. Because if they acknowledge that, that would be an even bigger problem, wouldn't it? So, like, nobody realizes the situation that D. Todd Christofferson is in right now, because the church is a globalist organization that has control over the global media in a lot of ways. Okay. And people laugh and they scoff at me when I say that. But I've seen press passes for people going to tell stories about the church. And then they've told me that the church spiked those stories. Beverly Campbell, in her quarterly notes that you can find on the church's website, the church history website, talks about spiking stories on behalf of the church. Okay. So what people don't realize about D. Todd Christofferson's situation is he knew that his brother was a pedophile. And no matter which way you look at it, he didn't do the right thing. Because if he didn't tell anybody, he left his own small relative children, right, across his brothers and sisters, and so on and so forth. I guess brothers, all brothers with him. But in his extended family, he left every single child in his family in danger of being molested by Wade Christofferson. And I'll be really interested to see if they ever release the names of the victims of Wade Christofferson, because I'd be willing to bet that you're probably going to find some Christofferson names, family names, on that victim list. So if he took that direction, he made a mistake, right? If he took the other direction, he also made a mistake. What he didn't
Yeah,
do is the right thing, which is to report it to the proper authorities so that his brother would be taken into custody and out of a situation where he had access to children any longer. And yet, this church, instead of the church which teaches repentance as its fundamental doctrine, instead of repenting, you get Dallin Oaks, who's not constantly saying, excuse me, who says, we don't apologize.
yeah.
Well, how do you repent if you don't apologize? How do you repent if you don't take accountability for the fact that you let your pedophile brother have access to children for 5 more
Justin,
years after you knew about it?
Justin, this is the Lord's restored church, and as an institution, it makes no apologies, it asks for no apologies, and it bears no obligation to repent of anything
Yeah.
because these are the Lord's anointed. And by the
Also, I mean,
way,
they
they've had
say,
their second fucking anointing. Okay? That means that unless they shed blood or deny the Holy Spirit, they they're good. Those are the two criteria, not raping a kid. I mean, you're home free if you rape a kid after your second anointing.
Also, I
That's
mean,
not one of the
they say
conditions.
that they don't harm children. So what more do you want?
Right.
They say it on the
Well,
website.
and let's go back to
Yeah.
zero tolerance, right? So I'll just like throw this out here because the church went after Bo Euler when he talked about Kurt McConkie. Like I'll throw something out there and they can come after me if they want to. So I had abuse in my family and I talked to my stake president about it. And he called Curtin McConkie. And what he reported back to me is that Curtin McConkie told him, we don't deal with that kind of abuse. And so the church failed to act.
What?
So
What?
zero tolerance, right? You can't talk about zero tolerance and then tell people like we're going to tolerate this. It just doesn't work that way.
I mean,
Okay.
it's exactly like this little excerpt that I've got up on my screen right now says. It's a public relations effort. The internal policies that exist that say there's zero tolerance, that say that they tell their employees or their officers, their bishops and whatnot, to report to the secular authorities or the civil authorities. That's just a public relations gimmick. It isn't
Which is
actually what they
propaganda.
do. Yeah, it makes them look good, but in reality, they do something entirely different. And let's say that it does get out. Well, the Salt Lake Tribune, it's not owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but you know what? It historically operated under a joint operating agreement with the Deseret News, and they shared the same printing presses, the same business operations team, so on and so forth. And therefore, the church was in a position to exert influence over which stories would be published and which stories would be not for both papers.
Which is
Because the
why nobody's
church,
ever heard of O. Preston Robinson, who ran
yeah,
Deseret News but was an abuser, as testified by Christine Hinckley, right? But nobody's
mm-hmm,
ever going to learn that. Same thing with Brenda Dick and Brenda Miles. The single worst piece of news that I've ever seen in my entire life was written by Tad Walsh in October of 2018 when Dick and Brenda Miles had a suit filed against them. And Tad Walsh wrote a story on behalf of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that never mentioned the name of the diagnosed pedophile who had been abusing since the 1970s up and down the East Bench, right? Didn't mention the second group of victims that included a girl that had to have surgery to repair the damage that Bill Carstensen had done to her, and never mentioned the name of Justin Hoyman, who had disappeared months earlier from Salt Lake City from a halfway house. Okay.
yeah,
It's nothing but propaganda, especially from people like Tad Walsh, but it's nothing but propaganda. And again, people just don't understand that. They don't understand the inner workings. And I think it does go back to what you said, which is these
yeah.
covenants that are made, right?
Yeah, it goes back to the covenants that are made. It goes back to the fact that a significant number of Latter-day Saints truly believe that their position in the eternal like hierarchy will be affected. And who wants to be reduced to being a dickless ministering angel who serves these exalted men who become gods and their wives who become gods? Who wants to be of lower rank in eternity? You know, the other thing is the church's sheer asset base from which it proceeds. So, our mutual friends, Jason and Alexia Preston, received a letter from the church security office saying that they couldn't set foot in any church owned buildings. Well, the church owns 150 acres in Salt Lake. It owns $2.5 billion worth of property. So theoretically, since that property is owned by the church, Jason and Alexia Preston would be on thin ice if they went to downtown Salt Lake. And
Not
that's
only
what
that,
they
it
own.
says that they can't talk to church leaders. What if one of their relatives, I mean, Alexia's family's not a member, but Jason's is. What if one of their family members gets called into a church leadership position? Are they no longer? And I think this is the real danger. I think this is really the core of the danger here because you have a church with so much power and so many assets. Like nothing that they do like is illegal. Like the whole hotline, they operate inside the law, but a church that operates inside the law sort of ceases to be a church because the whole purpose of a church is to transcend civil society and like you have to operate inside the laws, but you're also supposed to transcend those laws. What we have here is a bunch of cynical people who use the law and use their power and influence and use their relationships with organizations like the Central Intelligence Agency to skirt around the moral and ethical obligations they have as an ecclesiastical organization. And that's really dangerous. It sounds an awful lot like when Jesus was on the planet and a certain group of people that got him crucified to me.
Well,
Same pattern of behavior.
ultimately, what you're seeing in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the globalist template. They are they exert tremendous power and influence. They're not elected. They're not accountable to the populace and the voting populace, but they exert an inordinate amount of influence over legislation, an inordinate amount of influence over public policy, and they own property. And if they ban you, if they send you one of those letters, there's a significant portion of Salt Lake City downtown that you can't go to, legally
They're the
speaking.
second largest landholders in the United States.
Yeah, and that's how would you even know? Because half of it, most of it is held in shell companies, and you would have no idea. But because they sent you one of those letters, theoretically, they could bring legal consequences to bear on you in retaliation for dissenting from their preferred messaging and narrative. I don't think that that's a level of power that we want invested in a private corporation, even if it is a church. We don't want that, especially when that church has $250 billion in assets under its management and owns a significant amount of real property throughout the United States. As you said, they're the second largest. They're the second largest landowner in the country, and so that puts people who dissent against their.
Jason and Alexia basically can't go to Florida, is what I'm saying. Like if they step
Yeah,
foot on Florida,
and
like
they're from, like, Jason's from Florida. There's
so
significant
yeah,
portions of Florida that he can't travel across or visit or set foot on because the church owns so much land down there.
yeah.
Now,
There's two other things about that too that really bother me. So there's one thing about that letter, which is what the church tells Jason and Alexia is you're out for a year. And if you want to come back, then we reserve the right to talk to your doctors about any mental health situation and any
Whoa.
medication that you may be taking. Right.
and to
So
Wow.
compel you to take medication.
yeah. So then there's this other piece that's not about Jason and Alexi, but there was a letter that got published on X this week from a former member of the church who had left the church and but was asking the church to tell him what were they teaching his children and what activities were these children going to. And the lawyers from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints wrote a letter back and said, the church has no obligation to tell you what we are teaching your children or what activities they are participating in. Okay. And this is again,
Which is
this is just
exactly the
something
same tact that globalists take in public education.
that's
They
actually a really great point. I hadn't thought about that, but you're exactly right.
they
They're
they, they
not your
don't owe you an
children.
account. They're just going to take your money from your property taxes and whatnot, and they're going to do whatever the hell they want, and they don't answer to you. Maybe
Yeah.
you get a vote in terms of the school council every 4 years or so, but you don't have any input over what we're force feeding your children. And the truth of the matter is, under half of children are proficient in subject areas like math and reading and English, like composition, so on and so forth. They're not proficient in that, but they can tell you that Black Lives Matter. They can tell you that it's okay to be gay. They can tell you, love is love and all this other nonsense. Everything has been
Well,
reduced to these slogans that these kids regurgitate when they're conditioned and programmed by these schools, but they can't add, subtract, multiply, or divide. They can't write a complete sentence or a complete paragraph. They
it's the
can't.
same. It's the same in the church, Goel. I guarantee you that half of the missionaries who go out to serve for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are functionally illiterate in the doctrines of the gospel, but they
No
know
shit.
they know follow the prophet, right?
They know follow the prophet, and they know, like, what is it? What was the name of the manual? Come follow me or whatever.
Yeah.
Which
Preach my
is,
gospel is the one you're think. Preach my gospel is the one you're thinking of.
so the basics of that is, there's this analogy in Hebrews that you should grow beyond the need of milk as an infant in the faith, and you should have a need of strong meat. Well, what I would say to you is the curriculum of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is designed to keep you in a perpetual state of infancy as a Latter-day Saint, to where you never go back and look at what the Journal of Discourses actually say, what the Millennial Stars actually said. You never go back to see things like the King Follett sermon and so on and so forth. You're basically ignorant of that. You're focused on what's happening in April and October at General Conference, and that's it. And whatever little diet Christ they're feeding you in their training curriculum. So you never ask the hard questions. Critical thinking and critical analysis is the enemy of both governments and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. What they want is a population that is compliant, that does trust them implicitly, that does accept everything that they peddle to you as the facts and the truth. You never go outside of them, and even if you did, so what? They control the media outlets. So the media outlets in this country are owned by 6 major corporations. And before we die, it'll be 4 or 5, if not fewer. The trend has always been consolidation in media over the course of my lifetime. And as a result, there are fewer dissenting voices. I mean, we've all seen those videos on social media where it's very clear that the news anchors are reading off of the same script verbatim.
Yeah.
They're saying the same things. It's 20 different clips from 20 different news stations across the country, and they say the same fucking thing. And
Yep.
if
This
that
is Operation
isn't,
Mockingbird in full swing.
yeah, and so these are the things that um these are the things that the church does on a certain level as well. Everybody says the same thing. Everybody follows that guidance from General Conference. Everybody follows whatever message from the first presidency is issued through Ensign and so on and so forth. And everybody marches in lockstep. Nobody thinks critically about what it is that they're actually being asked to consume or do. If they
Or who they're
did,
following, or who they're following, which I think
yes.
is the
Yep.
biggest problem. Yeah.
And so in the chat, we have an individual boom snap. He's very upset with us because we won't say that the obvious, which is that the endowment um, cribbed liberally, plagiarized actually from Freemasonry. Um, he's upset that the church is apparently neurolinguistic programming. I don't know.
Oh,
Um,
There is some truth to that for sure.
he wants us to say, why do you people skirt around the truth? Nobody's skirting around the truth here, fucko.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not sure what we're skirting around the truth. I mean,
I think we've
the
been
only thing
pretty,
that hasn't really been brought up is maybe Envision Utah, which is kind of a
yeah.
result to a lot of this education
Well,
stuff,
we're gonna get
DEI,
around to that.
SEL. Right. So, I mean,
Uh,
we're not really skirting around anything. All
let's
three of us are not skeptical.
Justin was excommunicated for
not skirting
not
around.
skirting around the truth.
Well, I mean, let's
I'm
talk
no
about it.
longer a member because I said I withdrew my membership because I didn't believe the church was true. And Jacob K. Johnson here, while he's the conformist among us, ironically, he hasn't withdrawn his membership like a bitch. Like he's over here playing it being part of the Liberty.
I'm waiting for them to do it for me to just piss me off enough that they'll do it for me.
Yeah,
So let's
they're
talk
gonna
about this real quick
you
because
keep
it
hanging
does
out with
go.
us, and they're gonna excommunicate your ass in a heartbeat.
So, but let's talk about this for just a second, okay? So let's talk about these things that we're not talking about, apparently. So the church definitely stole from Freemasonry to build their temple endowment. There's zero doubt about that. Okay. Nobody, I don't even know why people talk about that anymore. But what do we know about Rotary International? Let's take it all the way back to the beginning. Rotary International is largely formed by who? By Freemasons.
Freemasons.
Right. So when the church got involved, so you have to remember, because of the Nauvoo debacle with the LDS Church and Freemasonry, when they went to Utah, the Utah Freemasons wouldn't let church members be Freemasons anymore. So there had to be a different way for those two organizations to interface with each other when they wanted to interface with each other. So what did they do? They introduced things like Rotary International, and that's where they could all get together and do their thing. Okay, so it's much deeper than just the temple endowment. Okay, that tie. Now, somebody sent me like a fascinating paper on the early history of Freemasonry in Utah, and they talk about explicitly. They like they index the Book of Mormon and say, here are the references in the Book of Mormon that are Masonic in nature. Okay, so it's not like the Freemasons aren't wise to what's going on here. They know exactly what the situation is. Okay, and so yeah, it was. But that, I mean, whatever happened in Nauvoo was a mess. I mean, it was just an incredible mess. Whatever they did with Freemasonry, it turned Freemasons off of Mormons in Utah for 100 and something years.
Here's what
Okay.
they did. They were running people through all the four beginning degrees in the course of a weekend.
Yeah, in days. Yeah.
And so the Illinois Grand Lodge was, once they got wind of it, was enraged by that because they didn't feel like they were taking it seriously. And it was yet another example of Latter-day Saints who felt like the rules that applied to everybody else didn't apply to them.
So
And that had
one of the
gotten them in
reasons,
trouble previously.
yeah, one of the reasons that Freemasons set up in Utah is that they, and it says this in this document that I posted on X, it says one of the major reasons that they set up lodges in Utah is because they were worried that Brigham Young et al. Were going to reach out to foreign Freemason influences and ask to be chartered through foreign Freemasonry instead of staying inside of the United States. So Freemasonry set up inside of Utah to stop Brigham Young from being able to do that. So
Hmm.
I mean, that's a fascinating relationship. And I think it really just shows you Joseph Smith and his total lack of regard for, like, once he learned it, it was his. And like anything he learned, you talk about intellectual property, right? Like anything that Joseph Smith learned about was now Joseph's to take, and it was malleable to do whatever he wanted to fit it into his theology. Okay.
Including all those translation errors in the 1769 King James Version that made it in the Book of Mormon, even though
Sure.
it was supposedly divinely revealed to him. I guess God um, was cribbing off of the 1769 King James Version, which, King James enthusiasts, people who are King James only, they probably agree with that shit, ironically. But ultimately, what you're saying, like, as soon as Joseph Smith learned something, it was his to do with as he pleased. He just made it up as he went along. And as a result, we have the fruit of a poisonous tree in the present day. We have an institution that is obviously corrupt, that is suppressing the exposure of sexual abuse, child rape by its membership and even some of its leaders. And that organization has contradicted itself throughout its history, about its history, about its doctrine. And as a result, you have a mess in the present day. You have a bunch of Latter-day Saints who don't know their ass from their elbow. And the reason the church has to keep them in the dark about its history, their history, is because the church has lied so damn much. It's not a true church. Like I said earlier in the podcast, it is a hedge fund masquerading as a church, and it's using tax-free tithing revenue that is donated to it by its members in good faith to build a war chest to crush all of its opposition.
Do you
And
think
and
that's the
that's what
goal? Do you think the goal is like military conquest? Like, I'm interested in that.
they don't need to exert military conquest. They don't need
It's through
to
this digital
exert
control.
they control all of the institutions in Utah. You think that a judge in the state of Utah who's an endowed Mormon is going to go against the church on anything? They're going to go against the church's attorneys when they're presiding over a case and it's Kurt McConkie on one side and a Gentile on the other? That's what they call non-Mormons. Or when it's a Mormon who is running against the church's interest by suing over the abuse that they suffered or that
Yeah.
their child suffered. You think that that judge is going to go against them? No, that judge is going to keep his temple recommends. He's going to keep his status in the church. He's going to
Yep.
keep the pathway clear for him to move up the ladder and become a stake president in Area 70, so on and so forth. He's going to keep his options open. He is not going to fuck with the church. He took that oath to fulfill the law of consecration, and he meant it. And he understands that his future rank in the church, in the priesthood, which has implications for his rank in the celestial kingdom, depends on him towing the line. So if
Yep.
you're a Mormon who has a bone to pick with an abusive member of the church or a corrupt member of the church that outranks you in the priesthood, or you're a non-Mormon, you are not going to get a fair hearing in the courts here. You're not
Yeah.
going to
What do you
be
think?
able.
I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm
Yeah,
interested in like what Jacob sees as end game, right? I'm constantly fascinated by this idea, like make it a trillion, right? That you'll hear from these members. Like God does not need $1 trillion for anything. So what do you think, Jacob, is the end game for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for acquiring all this wealth and power and land and all that? What's the point?
I mean, I think the point really is Agenda 2030.
Hmm.
It's Agenda 21. Um, it really is it's a takeover of everything to be able to enslave all of us. It's people want to call it a conspiracy theory, but it is a new world order. Um, because ultimately, who's driving all of this is going to be Satan, in my opinion, or evil, the dark energy, like whatever people want to call it, whatever people believe in. Personally, I believe in Satan. I've come face to face with evil, and so, but that's my personal opinion. I really do think it is just an ultimate enslavement of all humanity, um, and that's what we're moving towards. We're getting the number of the beast. We're getting this social credit system, but now it's going to be worldwide.
Yeah.
Um, and we carry around our existential crisis rectangles
Our
and
cells, those cell phones. Isn't
mhm,
it weird how it's called a cell, like a
right,
prison cell, right?
exactly. It's like a black mirror, and it gives us literally any bit of information at any point in time, and I don't think humans were built for that. I don't think we were supposed to have news from halfway around the world at all times. Um,
Mm,
we were never meant
and
for
what
that.
is the point of that? I mean, it's ultimately what you see with people is that they are insane with anxiety
yeah.
over
Right,
things that they can't control, that
right, which
aren't
opens
local
you
to
up
them.
for more brainwashing and emotional control, which is
Yeah.
usually put forth through the media and, through going to church and seeing all these meetings. And, um, I mean, the last time I went to an LDS church meeting, I walked out of there and I just felt gross. It felt dark, because of the message that was being pushed. I don't know if anyone else felt that way, but my wife did.
Hmm.
Uh, it just felt strange. It didn't feel like church did, back when I was a little kid. But granted, I was, going to a church, the LDS church in the 90s, and it felt different than what it feels like now. Um, and I haven't been back since, but yeah, that's what I personally believe. It's to get us all enslaved into Satan's world, and I mean we're pretty much there. Um,
So what's so strange about this to me, guys, is like let's just take the church at face value for just 1 second. Out of all the people in the world, the last group of people that you would expect helping to enslave humanity would be the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints because they have the Book of Mormon, which has what in it? It has the title of liberty. The whole book is basically about the liberty of man. So like this is just really curious to me. And then it also just really makes the second point is, and then I'll let you guys talk about it, but like the second point is what role does this 17 million people, that's really more probably like 7 million. What do they think their role is going to be in this global domination thing? Because unfortunately, like while the world sees Mormons as really good followers, right? Very compliant followers. The one thing that the world has not been willing to let the Mormons do is lead. Okay. And you see that with like Mitt Romney, who
Yeah,
did have the opportunity to run for president, but he was never going to be president. Okay.
right.
So, like, what
Well,
role do the Mormons think they're going to play in this? Do they think that
Mormons see
Jesus is going to come do
themselves
a judo move?
Mormons see themselves as Jews, plain and
Sure.
simple, and everything that the
Sure.
Jews are alleged to exert in the way of control or influence over politics, over the media, over the culture, that's what Mormons aspire to do. The Mormons who are active, the Mormons who are in the inner circle, that's the level of their conceit and the level of their ambition. And so what the church is doing is in accruing $250 billion and like making it a trillion is they're getting what is known in the secular world as fuck you money.
Right.
Right.
So at the end of the day, they are accruing assets. And I mean, let's say they only accrue like 8% a year out of $250 billion corpus. You know how much that compounds, how quickly that compounds? That's that's close to what? That's over 20 billion a year. Um that's $20 billion a year that they make in returns. And you know that their real property investments are only going to go up in value over time.
Yeah.
Like bottom line is that's what's going to happen depending on how those assets are structured. If they're owned by a nonprofit entity, they would theoretically be exempt from property taxes in certain jurisdictions. So they get all the upside, none of the risk. And ultimately, the point is, fuck you money. That's
Hmm.
what they're already telling people
Yep.
inside of their church. If you have a problem with sexual abuse, fuck you. If you have a problem with the fact that we got fined by the SEC for hiding assets from you, assets which your ties financed, then fuck you. We don't owe you an explanation. We're the Lord's anointed. Here's the other thing that you need to consider. While the church may be accruing fuck you money, there was a time in the 1940s where the church was almost bankrupt. And if you think that they got out of that situation without incurring debt that is ongoing to outside entities, they're a corporation. Who are the shareholders? Who do they
Right.
owe?
Right.
And how much of that arrangement has influenced the evolution of church policies over time and the evolution of church doctrine in practice, not theory. There's what the church says, and then there's what the church actually does.
Sure.
And how much of that is impacted by the fact that they're trying to promote these policies of being good global citizens, being
Sure.
compliant with whatever comes down from a top down authoritarian regime.
So the
And
irony there is that they want this money for independence, but in the end they're really enslaved, right? Which is just the
anybody who's
ultimate
ever had
irony of being.
money will tell you that that's the case.
Yeah.
Like, you think when you don't have money, you think that you're going to get money and you're going to get fuck you money and nobody's ever going to tell you what to do. All you do is wind up in a higher tax bracket. That,
Hundred.
that's that's all that you're so busy paying accountants and financial planners to structure your assets to minimize your tax liability.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, you are beholden to your money and
Yeah.
your assets. Like there is no such thing as fuck you money.
Yeah.
And I think
That's
Mormons are acutely aware of that because of their history, because at any given moment over that history, all was lost. They were chased from Illinois, from Missouri, from Ohio. They were chased west when they got to Utah. Eventually, they're in the late 19th century. Guess what? The U.S. Congress, because of polygamy, passed laws to strip them of their corporate charter, and they started seizing their assets.
yeah.
And so ultimately, that wound doesn't fade over time. And so when you see the church accruing $250 billion, it's not just the government that they're in opposition to, that they're hoping, oh, we're going to have enough money to where if they ever try to come after us again, we will have made ourselves invaluable to them. We will have embedded ourselves in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the CIA, the NSA, all of these alphabet organizations, but we will also have an asset base to repel any attempt to bring us to heel. On top of that, they're also looking at their membership, and they have evolved interests and values that conflict directly with that membership. And that's why they're hiding their assets. That's why they're hiding their spending. They're hiding it from Latter-day Saints because those Latter-day Saints might not be so amenable to giving 10% of their income to a church, an institution that has $250 million in assets. They might say, hey, you can fund your operations just off of the interest on your assets.
Yeah.
Why the fuck do we need to give you 10%? Like
Sure. Well, and it
some of
goes back to
us,
the infantilization that you talk about, right? It goes back to that, and it goes back to the church very much preaches buddy Jesus at this point, right? It's not the Jesus of whips and flipping tables. It's the Jesus of cowing to authority and being kind and loving and
not judging
peacemaking.
anyone.
Yeah. And so,
yeah,
like,
I
I think,
The
mean,
ultimate acceptance for every perverted thing out there. And honestly, it kind of seems like the church leaders were promised a seat near the throne in this new world order if they get the congregation to go along with it. Um, which to me explains the connection between the church and the UN, and why that is such a strong bond and only getting stronger by the year. Um, because the church is very much accelerating the UN plans to spread everything into a one world religion, one world government, one world banking system. And I mean, the good global citizen thing comes directly from this idea. Um, I mean, so in fact, let's see. So, Agenda 21 is a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the UN or United Nations system, governments, and major groups in every area in which human impacts on the environment. Uh, let's see, real quick, and then I'll wrap up. I'll land my plane on this. It's a quote about Agenda 21, which is Agenda 21 outlines in detail the UN's vision for a centrally managed global society. This contract binds government around the world to the UN's plan for controlling the way we live, eat, learn, move, and communicate, all under the noble banner of saving the earth. If fully implemented, Agenda 21 would have the government involved in every aspect of life of every human on Earth. So, and I I can't imagine why they would stop at just governmental systems. They're going to any system they possibly can, and this is
because
why
religion
it's
religion has always been the bulwark against
right,
government tyranny.
right,
Like if you look at Poland under communism, it was the Catholic Church that stood against
right,
communism, and the Catholic Church that provided the moral framework for the solidarity movement.
right,
Like these are the things. So they've got to co-opt religious institutions and get them on board in order
right.
to steamroll their opposition fully.
Which is
And
why when you look at like the communist revolutions, or if you read the Communist Manifesto, one of the things that Marx talks about is destroying the church, because to worship the state you can't have a church, you can't think of something larger than yourself. The only thing that can be worshiped is the state.
exactly, because if God exists apart from the state, then there is a reason to oppose the state's abuse of people, of individuals. If you're not created in the image of God, if all your rights are positivist rather than natural, that means your rights are granted to you by government rather than God,
which is insane.
then you don't have any ethical or moral framework to oppose state power. Um, at the end of the day, that's what this is. And that's what's happening in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And you see it, like, how many average Mormons voted to sustain this decision by the church to give members money, and it is members' money, to build a mosque? Like, at the end of the day, the church claims to be the restored church. It claims to be the one true church. It lays the same claim to ecclesiastical authority and ecclesiastical primacy as the Catholic Church in that respect. And its members genuinely tend to believe that. We tend to believe that the gospel was restored through Joseph Smith in the form of the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ, and the church was restored for the latter days dispensation, for the final dispensation. Well, what fits within that dispensation that involves the church taking member tithes and giving it to a religion that most Latter-day Saints would believe is false? Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, I mean the leadership of the church, I mean, the church was built on the law of common consent, and that law
Mhm.
is fully dead. Like there is
Oh, yeah.
nothing left of common consent inside the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's now an
Yeah.
aristocracy, right? Largely based on nepotism that runs things, and they just expect if we want to build a mosque, we build a mosque. If we want to build a temple with a spire, we're not going to ask our members whether or not they want to fight that fight. We're going to call the lawyers, and the lawyers are going to fight the fight for us. And we have the money, and we have the resources, and we have the patience to just mow over anybody that we want to, right? It's just a very strange, it's a very, very twilight zone for somebody who grew up in the church and spent 44 years in the church and learned about these things like the law of common consent. It's very strange to see the nature of the church right now and understand that, like, they want you to be a good global citizen, but you're not even a citizen of the organization that you were baptized a member of.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's as if they haven't learned from their history. I mean, this sort of attitude towards your neighbors, where zoning laws don't apply to you, regulations don't apply to you, you can just drown a municipality and its citizens that voted those officials into place for the purpose of defending their interest. You can just mow over them in litigation because you have so much money. Um, Ultimately, that attitude is what led saints to be chased from Missouri and Illinois. And they have this sort of persecution porn narrative where it's just so unfair. But at the end of the day, Joseph Smith did destroy the Nauvoo Expositor illegally. And people say, well, the First Amendment didn't apply there because guess what? It hadn't been incorporated to the states yet. But what they don't realize is the Illinois state constitution at that time guaranteed freedom of speech, therefore covering what the Nauvoo Expositor published in its sole issue. It also provided guarantees of due process through a court, and the Nauvoo City Council, which ultimately authorized the destruction of the expositor, was not a court. That was not due process. And he had no legal authority to do what he did, which was to call out the militia to destroy a private newspaper that was publishing things that he didn't like, things that were potentially damaging to him. And what you need to remember is the people who founded the Nauvoo Expositor, they were church insiders who were objecting to polygamy and other things that were being taught allegedly by Joseph Smith in private to his quorum of the anointed, the people who were in the inner circle. And that sort of conceit is why Joseph Smith was, sentenced to death in Missouri. He fled. He was a fugitive fleeing a warrant. He established the Nauvoo city charter so that he could be the chief judge, the mayor, the head of the city council. He could basically consolidate all power into his person. And as a result, you had saints who were going to other jurisdictions and committing crimes. And when those other jurisdictions filed for extradition, guess what? Those saints appealed to the Nauvoo courts for habeas corpus, and the resentment increased over time because saints were exempt from the laws that governed everybody else. That was the
Mm,
purpose of Nauvoo, to insulate Joseph Smith and saints from culpability, because they always believed, wherever they went, that they were above the law. And so, in that respect, they have emulated Talmudic Judaism successfully everywhere that they've gone, because they believe that they're a chosen people and they're beyond the reach of civil law and civil authority. And it's whatever they say they are in the state of whatever they say it is in the state of Utah. That's what they've built this $250 billion for. That's what they've built this influence for. And that's what the law of consecration is used to condition people who are Latter day Saints who are involved in civil government, so that they will always toe the line for the church, because their eternal destination and their eternal rank in the celestial kingdom depends on it. And so the average non-Mormon, they don't understand the intricacies of this. And they also, hold on a second, my boss is present. This is
oh, hey.
Layla. She has been pawing at me to pick her up and put her in my lap for a long time, but your average non-Mormon has no idea of this. And even a good many of your Mormons don't understand the implications of this. And if they do, they think, oh, well, it's the church, and the church is benign. But
Yeah.
when it comes to covering up sexual abuse, the church is quite malignant. When it comes to exerting influence over civil authorities to cover up prominent Latter day Saints wrongdoing, Latter day Saints who are part of that aristocracy that you spoke about earlier, it is quite malignant. And they definitely believe they're beyond the reach of the law.
Yeah.
Well, it's because they believe that they are, working on behalf of God because they're being told all of these things by the leader of the church. So, God's law trumps man's law.
Yeah. I think one of the most fascinating things, this might be my last point, but I think one of the most fascinating things to watch over the next 30 to 40 years is, people are really worried about the replacement, right? Immigration replacement of populations. And what we've seen just in these last few weeks is very, very interesting. So we like to say, demographics determines destiny. And what we saw is that for the very first time, the number of Latter-day Saints inside the United States of America actually went down, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the number of converts was a record year. So what that tells you is that they are allowing for like replacement, right, of your sort of traditional Mormon. The other thing that I saw, and I haven't had a chance to vet this yet, but I saw somebody put out a study that said that like over 40% of um, like your heritage Mormons have left the church in the last 30 years. So like I'm just going to be really fascinated to see as they try to globalize the church and as they try to Christianize the church. You see the church making a tremendous effort to be accepted by Protestantism and even Catholicism and so on and so forth in this, this very strange behavior that they have. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see as you have more and more converts that are outside the United States of America and more people inside the United States of America that are heritage Mormons leaving the church. Like I don't think you're going to recognize the church in 30 to 40 years. I think it's going to be something
That's
completely different
that's
than
the
anything that we've
reason.
ever experienced.
That's the reason those heritage Mormons are leaving, because the Lamanites are taking over and replacing them, and they
Yeah.
don't like it. The big sea change will be in the next 5 to 10 years when an African becomes a member of the Quorum of the 12.
Hmm.
Like that, ultimately, the reality of it is the church, the true blue Mormons, by and large, still cling to the conceit that dark skin is a result of a curse on the Lamanites. Like that's the reality of it. Um, they are extraordinarily racist. Uh, and whether you agree with it or you don't, the reason they're resenting their church is because their church has outgrown them. The church sees its growth opportunities in places like Central and South America and Africa. That's where their converts are growing. Everywhere else, they're hemorrhaging members and whatnot. But the church doesn't give a shit. because at the end of the day, the church has enough fuck you money at this moment to tell those heritage Mormons and those true blue Mormons, we don't need you. You're not where the growth is. And so those people are going to be replaced in their own church by the very brown and black people that they despise because
Hmm.
that's where the growth is in conversion.
That's
And
fascinating because it's almost a fulfillment of prophecy from the Book of Mormon, which, and I often wonder, we hear about it in the larger world about these Christian nationalists who are trying to accelerate the path to Armageddon because they believe in the infallibility of Scripture, and so they literally create the conditions by going to war against Iran or whatever, And I see the same thing sometimes inside the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that there are certain things that were predicted and prophesied that need to happen. One of those things is that the Lamanites need to come like a roaring lion and tear apart the unbelieving Gentiles who didn't keep the covenants that God asked them to. And I just kind of wonder if there's a part of this that is self-fulfillment of prophecy,
well,
and church leaders allowing things to happen so that those prophecies can be fulfilled.
they clearly believe that Earth directs heaven, which is what the Catholics believe with the Petrine keys. They believe that it's a mistranslation of the text. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. And what it actually says in the text, in the manuscript, is whatever you bind on earth shall have already been bound in heaven.
Hmm.
Whatever you loose on earth shall have already been loosed in heaven. Heaven directs earth. But in Talmudic Judaism, there's this infamous story. It's Bava Metzia. It's the oven of Akonai or something. And in it, it's a discourse between these rabbis. And one of the rabbis, he is more correct than the other rabbis about what the Torah says. And so he offers these proofs. He offers a carob tree that will, you know, be cut or torn down. The stream will flow backwards, so on and so forth. And at the end of it, the other rabbis who are in opposition to him cite that even with the voice of God coming down uh, to prove his point, that there's a scripture that they cite which says, you shall not listen to the boy, blah, 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 blah. And so at the end of the discourse in Bava Metzia, um, God is asked about this, and he said, my children, they have outsmarted me. It's basically
Hmm.
advancing the notion that you can outsmart God. And that's exactly what Latter day Saints are emulating. They are emulating Talmudic Judaism in that respect. It's just that their Talmud is called the Doctrine and Covenants. And it's not as voluminous as the Talmud um, and the Zohar in other books like the Tanya um, that Chabad Lubavitch promotes. It's ultimately they believe that earth directs heaven. And if you push God's hand enough, you will bring about this eschatological outcome. And the problem is they're not considering the human consequence. And of course, earth does not direct heaven. All that's going to happen as a result of this is that the church will be inundated with Africans and Hispanics, and its heritage people will decamp. They'll go form their own little fundamentalist sects and offshoots. And what you'll have is more sectarianism, more division. Um, Africans are not going to become whitesome and delightsome in fulfillment of prophecy as they become more righteous as Lamanites. That's a bunch of bullshit, and we all know it. That that's not going to be fulfilled at all. What is going to be fulfilled is the church is going to find more malleable membership
Hmm.
that ultimately is going to give it more and more money. And you see it in the church's current membership. Wealthy Latter day Saints routinely deed property to the church, they routinely donate stock options to the church. And the church gets richer and richer. And these individuals who are coming into the church, for better or for worse, they are true believers, as most of us are when we first convert. And we're born into the church. Their children and their grandchildren will be born into the church. And they, as part of their fealty to the church, will donate vast sums of resources and assets to the church. Then the church will increase its asset base. And even if they leave, and if they become disillusioned within that generation or the next, or the one after that, the church will, as an institution, outlive its followers. It's not a church, it's a hedge fund masquerading as a church. And that's all its leaders and all its connected aristocracy care about, is the fact that they are going to have so much money and therefore so much power that even if they only have 1 million members, they're still going to have the kind of money it takes to influence public policy and legislative outcomes. And they're also going to be able to manipulate markets. Like, that's the other part of this. Like, $250 billion is a lot of money. A fraction of that is a lot of money if you're buying options in a market. You can influence outcomes in terms of markets. That should be chilling to everybody that might be in the crosshairs of the church, because if you are in the cross of the church and you are a publicly traded corporation, they could tank your stock price if you oppose them. And that's ultimately the kind of influence and everything that they're clearly after, is the ability to deter people from opposing them and their agenda, because they have the kind of financial asset base to be very punitive to you. They have the kind of influence in the state of Utah, in the courts and the government and the bureaucracy and even the business establishment, to where even if they don't do it directly, true blue Mormons will do it for them without being told, because that's what the law of consecration is. There is no separation between the secular and the religious in such a calculation. And so when we talk about the church, we're talking about the church as a microcosm of globalism, because everything that globalists aspire to, the church has already achieved in the state of Utah. It's arguably achieved it in Nevada. It exercises outsized influence in Nevada politics. It exercises outside influence in Idaho. It certainly exercises outsized influence in Colorado and Arizona.
Arizona. Hmm.
Yeah. So in those states, the church, despite its small membership numbers, exercises an enormous amount of influence over public policy and legislation, which is why its members are able to avoid culpability for sexual abuse
Yeah.
because of the priest penitent privilege, which only exists because the church wants it to exist. And ultimately, what we're seeing here, the globalists look at what the church has been able to achieve and they covet that for themselves. It's not that the church looks at what globalists are advocating for. The church has already done what globalists want done. The church is already moving public policy in the state of Utah towards a 15-minute city, towards a social credit system, towards centralized control over every aspect of somebody's life. You're seeing it in this fight over water rights and water policy in the state of Utah. The people who control the water will control outcomes in terms of agriculture and business. And that's the reason it's important, in the state of Utah. That's the reason they're going for that, because it's another method of consolidating power over people in Utah, over businesses in Utah. And if you don't go along with what we want, guess what? You won't have water rights to run your farm. You won't have water rights to run your agriculture. And control of the food supply is directly related to control of water. At the end of the day, the globalists look at what's going on in Utah, and they look at what's going on in Utah as a result of the church's influence, and they say to themselves, God, if only we could do that ourselves. They're learning from the church. Don't think the church is learning from the globalists. The globalists are learning from the church. Utah is a laboratory for this, and it is ground zero for this. And like one of the things that I find ironic is Jason Preston was saying this 4 years ago, but he was still a member of the church. He could not see that the church was part of this, that the church was globalist, and the church is the reason globalism and global policies have taken root in Utah. Like he was still a member in good faith. He genuinely believed all of this up until recently when the church turned on him and barred him from all of its church owned properties because he was reporting on sexual abuse. That's the fucking level here. Like at the end of the day, Jason Preston, who was anti-globalist, I don't think anybody would question his bona fides in that respect. He would not shut up about globalist and globalism and the UN and the Lucis Trust and all of this other stuff that a lot of people thought was really out there. But he looks really prescient right now, except for one thing. He was a member in good standing of the institution that is advancing this agenda, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And you come along, Justin, and you start talking about the Rotary Club and the Rotarian influence over the church and how they sidelined Ezra Taft Benson and the part of the church that is, John Bircher's, people who are supporting Bo Gritz,
Mhm.
people who were preppers and so on and so forth. That component of the church has either been excommunicated or driven out. They're inactive. They're disgusted with the church. They feel stigmatized by the church, and they think to themselves, "Our church was taken over." And yes, it was. It
Yeah.
is taken over.
Yeah. It's a really fascinating point, and I think that it's really the Achilles heel of this whole thing. So we've talked a lot about the problem, right? I think maybe we could talk about the solution, in my opinion, really quick, which is for globalism to take root and to overtake current systems of governance and so on and so forth, they have to present it as in the best interest of the people that are going to be governed. And what learning about abuse in the church does is that it pulls the veil back from this lie that the things that they're doing are in the best interests of the people that are going to be governed. And it causes people to stop and think critically. Because when you see abuse victims being treated as human resource problems instead of children of God, it causes some cognitive dissonance inside the members of the church that the church cannot have members experiencing. And so, like, one of the reasons that I stick with this, because honestly, it's not all that fun, right? Like, you kind of live under this constant threat of like people doxing you or exposing, whatever. Like, you know, you live under the threat of receiving a letter from Curtin McConkie any day, right? But the reason that I do it is I really feel like it's the Achilles heel of these globalists inside the corporation who have attached themselves to the spiritual body like a parasite and have sucked out everything good that I remember from the church that I was a member of for 40 plus years. So
Yeah.
I really encourage people to look at this abuse situation. I mean, we've made so much progress, right? Like we now are at a situation where Dallin H. Oakes's son-in-law has been named in a lawsuit for covering up abuse in Rockford, Illinois. We have D. Todd Christofferson, who knew about his brother's pedophilia since 2020. So we have 2/3 of the first presidency that we've tagged as those who do tolerate abuse, despite the church's strong affirmation that they don't tolerate abuse. Then we have the Gordon Bowen situation, right? Who bought his way out of being held accountable for justice. And the church continues to have a 40-year relationship with this guy. And when people learn these things and they realize that the church doesn't have their best interests, right, at heart, all of a sudden, all this globalist mumbo jumbo it's on the table again for conversation. Because if the church isn't willing to take care of its abuse victims, do they really want to take care of me as a member of the church? And when I think when members look at that, they realize, no, the church doesn't have its members' best interests at heart anymore. Unfortunately, they just don't.
Well, they have your best interest at heart as long as you're compliant. Do you know? I mean,
That's still their best interests, Goel.
one one of one of the things that was really mind-boggling to me was realizing, based on people sources that I cultivated pretty early on, how much rent in the Salt Lake Valley is being paid by the church
Mm,
as hush money for abuse.
mm,
So the victims who don't sue, who remain inside the fold, who don't threaten to litigate, they get their rent paid for. They get
wow,
their food paid for on the church's dime, but it's
wow,
hush money. And since they attend and they give the little 10% of whatever the church gives them, even though they're mentally fried and horrifically like damaged from the abuse because they went through the church's processes, all their basic needs are met. In my opinion, they're stepping over dollars to pick up dimes, but they're content with the bare minimum of their needs being met. And the church is content because they're still members and they're not an eyesore to the church. And then of course when you have ward clerks who start noticing the outflows of money and asking questions about why this individual receives this much financial support, they're shushed by the bishopric and the stake presidency because the church doesn't want you to know why this individual who's jobless receives this kind of support and this kind of money. That has happened over half a dozen times in terms of like somebody coming forward to me. It
mm.
started with one individual that I met through my wife's nonprofit, and that was a big moment for him. Was why is this guy receiving this much in the way of like outlays for his rent and for his food? Why is he receiving this kind of support? Why don't we just why isn't he making forward progress to getting a job and becoming self-sufficient? And it's because that individual, like a lot of others that I've become aware of, is milking the cow, so to speak, and the church is perfectly content to pay for their rent and their food and their medical care, as long as they don't go outside the church for a solution to their trauma and their abuse. That's way more common than membership realizes.
I'd never
Um,
even heard of that. That's crazy.
yeah, and so all everybody ever hears is these victims who threaten to litigate, who go outside of the church to the civil authorities, so on and so forth. But there's a whole shadow group of people in the Utah Valley, whose rent is paid by the church, whose basic expenditures are paid by the church, whose lives are basically subsidized by tithers in the church so that the church can keep things quiet. And there's an enormous amount of that going on. As much as you think there are numbers of people who go outside of the church to sue and litigate successfully and unsuccessfully, who screech and scream about the abuse that they suffered and the way the church handled it. There are a number of people who went the church's route internally and they took their 30 pieces of silver to keep quiet.
Mm,
And they will perpetually be subsidized by the church, like as long as they toe the line. That's the reality of this. And since the church is $250 billion, what's $1,000 a month in rent
right.
for a bunch of people who suffered abuse on the part of prominent Latter-day Saints? Some of those Latter-day Saints are in positions, they're in high callings for the church. And they don't just have one victim, they have dozens. And the church is paying a great deal of money to keep that quiet.
Wow.
They're the thing of it is they've abused their own children and grandchildren to where those children and grandchildren grow up to be 13-year-old boys who sexually assault other children. Don't think that Peyton Bussey or Christopher Michael Jensen or any of the others that I'm aware of, don't think for a second that they occurred in a vacuum.
Right.
They learned that behavior. They did not just one day innovate themselves and come up with the idea to sexually assault one of their 12 or 13-year-old peers or a 5 or 6-year-old boy at a swim meet. That's a learned behavior on their part.
Well, one of the most alarming things about that Bussy case is that he was searching for, what was it, like gay father porn. That was one of the things they found when they searched his devices, right? And that just
Yeah.
leads to a whole host of questions that nobody wants asked, you
You
know.
should ever, I've said this till I'm blue in the face in terms of the role of bisexuality and ritual abuse groups. That series that I did over at IRA, in terms of multiple times I've talked about this on IRA's live streams. Anytime you see a gay or bisexual child who's out and about in a Latter-day Saint family, you need to take a long, hard look at their parents. You need to take a long, hard look at the adults who are in a position of authority because homosexuals don't reproduce. Like what they do is they groom and they train children. And those children may identify as being gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender at some point in the future, but that's a learned behavior. That's a behavior that takes normalization through abuse and through grooming. And especially in Latter day Saint families where the family proclamation is a non negotiable, you would think that heterosexuality was what was being normalized and promoted. And instead, what's happening is you're seeing more and more Latter day Saint kids come out as LGBTQIA. Like you're seeing Garrett Walter Gong has a son named Matthew Gong who identifies as a queer polyamorous Mormon. The cognitive dissonance in that identity is stunning. You can't be queer in Mormon. You can't be polyamorous in Mormon. Like there's no hyphenates in Christianity. Like there's
No Lamanites and Nephites, no manner of ites.
no. I mean, at the end of the day, you're either a Christian or you're not a Christian. And if you are a Christian, that means you're a member of a club that plays by the rules. You actually live it. You don't just profess it. And what we're seeing in Latter-day Saint households, especially in prominent families like the Gong family, the Christofferson family, he has a gay brother. He also has another brother who is clearly a pedophile, or as they call them now, minor attracted persons, because they're trying to make that an orientation. Um, you have to ask yourself, what the fuck happened in the Christofferson house when these boys were growing up? When you hear the allegations about Dick and Brenda Miles, what was normalized for Brenda Miles to be married to a man who would make a child drink urine and feces laced Kool-Aid? Like she just she was just married to Dick Miles, and when he brought that up out of the clear blue,
Yeah,
she was
the thing that's so alarming about this is that I tend to like to research things that are easy to falsify because it doesn't take a lot of time, right? But I'm now 3 years into a research project that, like, when you hear about Dick and Brenda Miles, and then you go talk to the people who knew Brenda Miles growing up and the people who taught her in school and these sorts of things, what you learn is that you're not falsifying the hypothesis. You're actually learning behind the scenes. It's just in this particular environment, nobody will come forward publicly. They're very happy to talk privately about what they've observed and what they believe. And what they
Mhm.
tend to have observed and believed actually like lends credence to the hypothesis. But as a researcher, you're stuck in this world where you know way more than you can ever tell because the people who tell you the things aren't willing to go public about it.
They
So
tell you
you're
in
like,
confidence.
yeah, it's
Not a
purgatory, right? You're in research
when
purgatory.
when I first took the Dick and Brenda Miles case, what stuck out to me, and what stuck out to me in the Hamlin case, nobody defended these people.
Right,
Nobody said this is bullshit. My
right.
worst fucking enemy, and I've got a lot of them over the years. Um, there's a lot of people who think I'm an asshole because I am. Um, but if you were to accuse me of raping a kid or raping anybody for that matter, they would look you in the eye and they would say, absolutely fucking not. Absolutely not. He would never. He hates pedophiles and rapists. Like, he beats the shit out of them. when they're in proximity to him and they've done something inappropriate. I've seen him do it. Like he just does not put up with that at all. Like he doesn't accept it, he doesn't normalize it, he doesn't excuse it, he doesn't contextualize it. It is something that he is violently against.
Yeah.
So my reputation would be such that even the people who hate me would absolutely not jump on that bandwagon. And the thing
Yeah.
about Dick and Brenda Miles and the people in the Hanley case, it's not that these individuals hate them. It's just that they find the allegations plausible based on their prior behavior and conduct and based on what they know about their families. Yeah, I could see that. In some cases, it was impropriety that they witnessed firsthand in
Yeah.
their upbringing, behavior that they witnessed. There's nothing innocent about that. There has to be a root cause, and I only
Yeah.
see
The only people who say that could never have happened are the people who've never looked into it. The people who've never talked to anybody involved or lived in those cities. When you talk to the people who live in those cities, not only do they say, yeah, that's plausible, but then they point you to like Mount Olympus. And so
hmm
now you're not just studying Dick and Brenda Miles, you're going back to Mount Olympus. And like it's just a never-ending chain of people being like, oh yeah, I knew several people who were abused. And here's their names and here's their addresses. And you find that just up and
they
down that
know
entire I-15 corridor, like nobody pretends except for the people who've never looked into it, but
they
they're the
know the
most
exact wards, the exact
sure.
neighborhoods, the exact stakes, the exact individuals and families. They start spilling things left and right, and everything that they tell you is verifiable.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's a frustrating route to feel like you understand and know so much about a group of people who are dead set against destroying you when you tell them about the truth about uh their history and their environment.
And
So,
again, I mean,
yeah,
the globalist side of this, what do we hear about UN peacekeepers in foreign theaters? We hear that they sexually abuse children.
yeah,
We hear that they engage in prostitution and trafficking. And that shouldn't be the case in a church that claims to be of God and through Jesus Christ, but it is the case. The reality of it is the church has an absolute standard when it comes to the law of chastity that you can only have sex in the bonds of wedlock, matrimony, between a biological male and a biological female. And what we know about Latter-day Saints, especially in Utah, is that they routinely and with impunity violate the law of chastity, which is one of the core teachings of the church. And they don't confess it in their interviews. Like, they don't confess their sexual sin. They maintain their temple recommends. They maintain access to the temple, which makes the allegations that they entered the temple after hours to engage in this kind of behavior more
yeah,
plausible than not. And then you have direct eyewitness confirmation of it in the form of the people who were abused in the temples by these individuals. Like at the end of the day, this is what the church has become. It has become a globalist institution, but it's also become a Luciferian institution. And the people at the very top, when M. Russell Ballard was alive, it was 14 out of 15 at the top officials of the church had dozens of allegations that I was aware of ritual and non-ritual sexual abuse and sexual impropriety against them. And I don't know about Kieran other than he covered for Peyton Bussey. Like I know that he did that based on the paperwork that I uncovered in that story that I did about Peyton Bussey. It was the first story I ever did on church sex predators. I put all of those documents up for anybody to access at investigationsofritualabuse.com, and it very clearly says that Patrick Kieran was one of the people who was mentoring Peyton Bussey unsuccessfully, given that he has two criminal records in Washington. He has two criminal cases currently for sexually abusing children in both Washington State and Utah. He has a federal case pending against him for the possessing and distributing child sexual abuse material. And before that, he had a conviction for sexually abusing two boys. They believe they were 6 and 5 years of age. And he did that as a 13, 14-year-old boy. And you got to ask yourself, where the hell did he learn that? Like, where the hell did he learn that behavior? Where the hell was that normalized for him? And when you look at his parents' reaction, Phil and Kathy Bussey, and you look at where Kathy Bussey is from, she's from Sanpete County, which is where a lot of these Hamlin allegations are centered. She was born and raised in Mount Pleasant, as I understand it. And where did they send their son when he was facing criminal culpability for sexually abusing children as a teenager? They sent him to Wasatch Academy, where he graduated. And Wasatch Academy has an alleged member of the CS named Alyssa Wolf on their faculty. Like, she's named in the Hamlin victim statements as attending CS rituals or ordinances or ceremonies and participating in the abuse of children. And when she wasn't participating, she was allegedly observing that abuse. She was present. And she's an educator at Wasatch Academy, which is where Peyton Bussey was sent in the aftermath of his conviction as a teenage boy. He was sent there to go to school. And that should be chilling to anybody. The corroborative coincidences keep piling up. And when you look at the church's position on child sexual abuse, that it doesn't have a duty to protect children or to report the abuse, even though its internal policies say it has a zero tolerance policy towards child sexual abuse, even though its internal policies uh, presume to say that, oh, we tell our bishops and our stake presidents to report the abuse to civil authorities. The reality of it is they don't. It's window dressing. It is a public relations ploy on their part to have those policies written down, but they don't say that it imposes a legal duty.
Yeah. I mean, the Supreme Court has said several times police do not have the legal authority to, or the
Or
legal
legal duty.
obligation, yep, to protect any citizen. That also included the courts in another ruling they gave, and I mean, we basically we do not live in the country that it was supposed to be.
We don't live in a country where our public servants are actually public servants who are
No,
accountable to the public. And
correct,
again, that is a globalist ploy. They believe that they know what's good for you, and they've built the infrastructure and
right,
the legal um, exemptions for themselves to do whatever to you. Like,
correct,
that infrastructure is already in place. That's what people don't realize. It's already in place. They're just not competent enough to deploy it to any great effect because they have to maintain this illusion that you still live freely. What they're going to try to do is create a crisis that is severe enough for you to give your consent, either incrementally or outright, to whatever solution that they impose.
correct,
Um, they're already telling you in advance that you're a useless eater. They're already telling you in
right,
advance that they basically need over half of you to die in order to reach optimal population levels. Sustainable population levels is what they call it.
right,
The reality of it is, we already produce enough food to feed the population of the globe, the world population, 1.5 times over. We could meet their caloric needs. The reason we don't is because of endemic corruption, endemic violence that obstructs supply lines and supply chains so that we can't get the food where the demand is. We can't get the supply where the demand is. And the reason for that is because a lot of these obstacles are imposed by globalists. The reason the people of Iran aren't able to get food and shelter and clothing and water on a sufficient level is because scarcity hasn't been imposed on them um, by sanctions, which are ostensibly aimed at the leadership, but which never seem to affect the leadership of any country that those sanctions are imposed on. It only falls on the ordinary citizen of a country like Iraq or a country like Iran. And the elites continue to live the high life. They continue to be very wealthy. They continue to send their children abroad to live in luxury. Like that's the reality of it. If sanctions worked, um, that would be one thing, but they don't. Like there is no dislodging the mullahs in Iran from power. There is no dislodging the current elites of Iran from power through sanctions. And do you really want to expend the blood and treasure necessary to remove them from power? I think we've established that the people of Iran don't have the arms or the training or the wherewithal to depose their leadership. I mean, they murdered 40,000 of them in the aftermath of protests which were fomented by outside forces such as the United States and the Israeli government. We don't care how many Iranians die, or at least our government doesn't. They believe that even if 40,000 Iranians are killed by their authoritarian rulers, oh, well, that will increase global support for outside intervention. But outside intervention is impractical. Outside intervention will take more than just the United States and Israel bombing the shit out of Iran. It will take boots on the ground, which there is no public appetite for. You see them trying to restore the selective service registration in the draft, which was suspended because they clearly intend to draft people if they can. If they can do it without increasing social unrest, they're going to do it. They're going to try to put Americans on the ground in Iran. They're going to try to build a coalition of allies. They're going to try to rope any number of people into this. And a lot of people are going to die, not just Iranians, but Americans. And at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, for what? For what? Is Iran a bad regime? Sure. There are lots of bad regimes around the world. You put them in power. You made them possible. Iran has been running a fleet of ghost tankers that export their oil in violation of those sanctions for years. They earn something like $40 billion a year in revenue off of their oil, which is supposedly barred from public markets. Um, and they do it with impunity. If you really wanted to change things, you would have stopped that fleet of ghost tankers a long time ago, but you didn't. Like, at the end of the day, this is all window dressing for regime change so that Iran can be part of a globalist community with a central bank that is ultimately controlled and directed by outside globalist forces. That's what this is about. That and the fact that Iran has challenged the primacy of the petrodollar or the petrodollar. Like, that is what the United States safety, security, and supremacy, hegemony rest upon. The demand for the U.S. dollar, because the U.S. dollar is the denomination that oil is purchased in globally. And so if you control the purchase of oil by creating artificial demand for the dollar, because you can only purchase oil in dollars according to the current arrangement, which was arrived at in the 70s with the Saudis, guess what? The United States will maintain its hegemony. If the dollar can be purchased in other currencies, guess what? The United States loses that hegemony. It loses the ability to project force. It loses the ability to maintain 1,000 bases around the world. That's the reality of it, and that's why we're involved in Iran, and that's why, like authoritarian ecclesiastical institutions like the LDS, have proven to be such a fertile ground for intelligence operatives, for law enforcement operatives, for government bureaucrats, is because they are conditioned to do whatever they are told without asking questions, without thinking about the real reason why our foreign policy is directed the way that it is. And in that respect, the Mormon Church has done its job for globalism. It has produced good little compliant cogs in a machine. And it has also managed to exert a level of influence and power within the state that it is headquartered in that globalists look at and they say to themselves, these guys know what they're doing. They have centralized power, they have consolidated it, they direct it as they see fit. And the people who operate on behalf of this church, they truly believe that their eternal destination is contingent upon their compliance with this institution. And that's a powerful thing for them. It could be a powerful thing for us. And so, what they're trying to figure out is how to create a one world religion, a one world belief system that can indoctrinate people into the same attitudes, the same compliance, the same fealty. Um, that's their aim. Now, they're stupid. The thing about it is, inherited wealth does not lead to competence. And the vast majority of these people, um, the reason they're globalist is because they're silver spoon coons. Like, that's all there is to it. They inherited their wealth. They believe that that is a sign of their virtue and that they are entitled to direct the poor and the downtrodden in whatever direction that will benefit them. But the reality of it is, outside of their wealth managers, they can't do shit. Sam Walton's children, they're worth $40 billion apiece. But what do they do in terms of running a day to day business? How many businesses have they created, even though they had a $40 billion head start and leg up on the rest of us? What have they done? They just inherited all that wealth. And with it, the influence to affect public policy and legislation and cultural norms. And it has been an unmitigated disaster for the world to tolerate that. I have no problem with someone inheriting wealth in a closely held corporation that they actually run. That's what most family businesses used to be.
Right.
But the one area that I support an estate tax in is when it's a publicly traded corporation. The shares should not vest in the children who have nothing to do with the day to day running of that business. And those children should not have a majority vote, even though they have minority shares in the overall corporation. They have a majority of the voting shares, and they exercise outsized influence over that. It's one thing if it's the Ford family, which actually their people actually participate in the day-to-day operations of Ford Motor Company. Now that's a mixed bag. That's why they had to be bailed out. That's another thing I'm in opposition to, but that's the reality of globalism. It is centralized, consolidated power in the hands of rich people who did not earn it. Um,
Correct.
Heirs, primogenitors. Justin, you've been quiet for a while. You've listened to me rant and monopolize the conversation, whatever.
No,
Uh,
yeah. So I got to bail. Actually, I have a 5 o'clock call with a victim, but just want to thank you for having me on today. I mean, and just to wrap it up, I'd say like the biggest frustration that I have with members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is their lack of curiosity. They're very content with what they've been fed, and because they like, you have to give the church credit where credit is due. The church is very good at lifting people out of poverty inside the kingdom of the devil and allowing them to live fairly comfortable lives. So the thing that happens is that as they're lifted out of that poverty, they become complacent. Nothing that we've talked about here today is secret knowledge. Everything that I ever publish is found in public forums,
mm-hmm.
uh, public systems of information. And so if anybody wants to go learn about this situation with the church and the Transcontinental Railroad and the sugar companies and the CIA and the military industrial complex and the abuse situation with abuse cover ups and all that stuff, all you have to do is be curious about it. You don't have to believe anything that we say. And so I would just encourage anybody who sees this, like, they don't need to take my word for it. Like, just go get curious, because unfortunately, like, your salvation is sort of attached to it. And you've given over your agency to an organization that doesn't have your best interests at heart anymore. So I just thank you for this opportunity. It's been fun. Like, I don't get to put on my conspiracy theorist hat as much as I'd like to anymore. So this has been a fun conversation, and
Well,
I enjoy
there will
it.
be many more episodes of the Triumvirate to come.
Let's do
Um,
it.
I think this
I
episode
agree.
kicked a lot of ass for first time out of the gate. Justin's haters are a little bit late to the chat.
Did they make it? Did my fan
Uh,
club make it to the chat?
One of them did. Harry Roanoke 2508. Hey, Justin, we know what you are. That's what I love about these people.
Oh
Um,
no.
they always make these little vague statements, but they never say what exactly it is that you are that's apparently so sinister that they need to be
Someday I'll
vague about it.
tell. I'll tell. I know exactly what they're talking about. The thing that they don't know is that I have hours of recordings and hundreds of documents to show the true story behind what they think the story is. So that'll be a
Sure.
fun. That'll be fun sometime.
Yes, that I'm sure it will be once they start slinging actual specific mud.
Yeah.
Jacob, I'll let you have the last word, and then we'll wrap it up.
Honestly, I just kind of want to back up what Justin said. Don't take any of our word for this. Just go read the words of the people we are talking about. Everyone admits to this stuff out and in the open. I mean, the only difference is we all three of us have read what they say. So we're really just kind of repeating what they themselves write down, what they claim to be doing. Um, but yeah, don't take just our word for it. Actually believe your eyes, believe your ears, and then go read what they say, because this is all out in the open. None of this
Oh,
information is really that hidden. So, you
all
know.
I'm gonna say is I thoroughly disagree with that. Say I want you to believe everything that I say, and I want you to give me a lot of money. You know, it's not so much that I disagree with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in principle. I'm just envious. You know what I could do with $250 billion? Yeah, you know what kind of shit I would do if I had a quarter. Well, first off, there'd be a lot of dead pedophiles. Um, like a lot of dead pedophiles. Like sex offender registries would be empty if I
no,
had a
that's
quarter of a
uh
trillion
that's what
dollars.
that Alaskan Avenger did. He went to prison
Yeah,
for it.
yeah.
I'm not a big fan of him himself, but I do enjoy the fact that he went to prison for that. That was quite impressive.
He should have been given the keys to the city. Harry Romo is like, it's the Satan crew. Yes, it is, Harry. It is the Satan crew, and we do
Satan
stand
Crow.
against we do stand against the devil, collectively and individually. Um,
Mhm.
it is our great joy to piss him and you off. Um,
I
No,
didn't. I
it's
didn't know Kim Watson Smith was going by Harry today. That's interesting. That's.
well, she is Harry, not the name, but she has
You
to.
know, it's so funny. Like, I'm sure, Goel, like, you would invite any of these people to come on and talk to us, right? Like, they don't need to be keyboard warriors, right? They can come on the
You
show and they can.
would like. I don't know that I would
Oh,
because
I'd
I
love
hey,
to have
they're
keyboard
welcome on
conversation.
my platform.
I
Yeah.
would be fine
Mhm.
having them on, but the problem is like I would buzzsaw them so bad that it would martyr them. Like
Yeah.
at the end of the day,
I just think
like
it's a very strange new reality for me to have a fan club that wants to chase me around and subtly threaten me and all this kind of. You've probably been dealing with it for a while, Goel, but it's a brand new
oh
experience,
yeah.
and it's just funny to me because I don't really. You say you have a lot of enemies. Like, I don't really have any enemies. I'd love to just get on a chat with them and like let's just let the war of ideas play itself out. I have a great deal of confidence that we're on the right side of eternity here. They may be on the right side of history, but we're on the right side of eternity.
They're not on
So
the right
it's
side of history. They're not on the right side of anything. They don't even know what side they're on.
No, they have
Like,
they have to go to Satanists to actually have somebody to agree with their
to agree
positions
with
that
them.
they take. So
yeah,
Mormon
so
Satanic Panic, Gray Faction, and Jonah Barnes. What a pair!
yeah.
Pair.
Harry Romo, like we would associate with you losers.
What are you
Well,
doing on our chat then? You're associating with us
Harry,
right now, you moron. No way.
um,
Like,
Yeah, this is
did you see
really good
Preston
at
have
not
to take
associating.
down his latest? I'm not aware of that, Harry. Um, Jason Preston doesn't tell me what to do, and I don't tell him what to do. So if he took down some content, um, I'm unaware of it, and he doesn't keep me abreast of it. I think you and a lot of others have a misbegotten understanding of how this works. I don't tell Jason and Alexia Preston what to do, and they damn sure don't tell me what to do. We
uh,
all act independently, but because we're all adults, even if we disagree, like we tend to just, oh well, that's their platform and their content. They can do whatever they want. Um,
I
I
love
know
how
that
these people like try to fill in the gaps of the stuff they don't see. Like they just make stuff up. It's
I like I'm supposed to give a shit what Jason Preston does on
right,
his channel.
right, right. It's like
Like
the
you
only
appear
the only
on
thing
the
I
show,
care about is I just don't want to get sued with Goel. That's the only thing I care about. I just
I'm
like I
not
don't
I
want to be on
haven't
shit.
been sued. I have not been sued.
right?
Um who pays for your lawyers? That would be donors and myself, Harry. So, uh, good
This
luck
is
with
better.
that.
Like I like this ask me anything format. We should do this with the Triumvirate. We should just
Ooh, a
let everybody come and
Q&A.
ask me anything.
The
I don't
problem
have
is
any.
they'll all show up on Mormon time like 3 hours into the episode
We need to wrap up.
and then want us to stay on when we have places to be and things to do. I mean, you're
Right.
I do. I
7 minutes
gotta
away
go.
from an interview, so thank
Yeah, I gotta
thank you
go.
both for being on this inaugural episode of the Triumvirate. We will try to do this at least once a month if it's okay with you guys,
You
Fine
bet.
with me.
and
I'm excited for this.
have a pretty freewheeling discussion about the issues of the day and pissing off people like Harry Romo. So Harry, in about 4 weeks, no, Kim Krog has never paid for an attorney for me, Harry. Nice try. Um, I
See,
wish
These
Ken
guys
did.
are
just
That
so
making
great.
stuff up.
I love
Just
it.
making stuff
it
up, man.
it it would be fucking great. Tim Ballard has definitely never paid for anything for me, and I shit on Tim Ballard on IRA for
I want nothing from that man.
adultery.
Oh,
Like I think it's hilarious that Harry thinks I take money from Tim Ballard or anyone like Tim Ballard. That's fucking
I would
that's
love
insane.
to see
Tim
where
Ballard does not like me. Tim Ballard tried to meet me for dinner once through somebody, and I shot that shit down. Like, good luck with that, man. Like,
I like their conspiracy theories. It's so like I love it. Come back,
Mhm.
Harry, please,
yeah,
please.
very,
Harry.
very
What's
creative.
next? Take another guess. You guess Ken. You're guessing Tim. Fuck. I mean, yeah, after you guys get off, I'll stay on here and just shit on Harry.
All right,
Like,
I gotta bounce though, guys. Thanks for the fight. It's been great. I'll look forward to next month.
maybe we agree on something. Well, when it comes to Tim Ballard, it's hard to disagree. That he's an adulterer
We'll
and
see
a
you guys.
grifter.
See you, Justin.
I'll talk to you guys later. Jacob, thanks for being on here. You want to stay on a little bit longer and go round and round with Harry?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, I've got
Come
a few
on,
more
Harry. Take another shot. Take another shot, Harry. I got another Guinness.
minutes.
Another non-alcoholic. What's the point, Guinness? Yeah.
Yeah,
So one
these
holdover.
people always crack me up. Um, and there's so many people that I find on X that are just trying to attack you guys, and they never come across my feed until there's a reply to somebody. And I probably spent 2-3 hours the other day digging through a bunch of your guys' criticisms from these people, and very creative people. Very
I knew
creative.
you drank. Yes, Harry, I drink non-alcoholic. What's the point, Guinness? That's why the blue band is on it. It doesn't have alcohol. I used to drink quite a bit before I became a Latter-day Saint, and even though I've since left the church, I didn't pick it back up, much to the consternation of everyone who used to know me. So yeah, I drink non-alcoholic Guinness, Harry. You got me. One
You
of the great,
you got the scoop here first.
yeah, one of the great things about leaving the church is I enjoyed the taste of beer. I enjoy cold beer, and I just don't drink alcoholic beer anymore.
Right.
Um, how long were you Mormon? Um, let's see, probably about 5 years, easily active. Um, I became a Mormon in large part, Harry, because I found out I was going to be a dad, and I immediately quit all of my hedonistic pursuits, um, cold turkey. And the only one that really bothered me was caffeine. Alcohol was pretty easy to quit. Drugs were pretty easy to quit. Um, but caffeine, I'm not gonna lie to you, that was a bitch. Um,
Yep. Caffeine and nicotine. I mean, that's about my vices these days. Used to have a lot more vices.
why did
Not
your
anymore.
wife leave? Okay, so my wife, 2 weeks after we were baptized into the church, told me that we should get divorced and find other Mormons that we were more compatible with. Um, and I said, I don't think that's how this works. And my bishop said it wasn't how it worked. And then we went to a Mormon marriage counselor, and she proceeded to say a bunch of crazy stuff about me um, to that counselor. And I knew it was over. She said I want to kill my own mother and all this other bullshit. I've been
Wow.
pretty open about that. Yeah, it sucked. And my kid wasn't even a year old when we separated. And so that was 9 months of my life that I'll never get back. Uh, and then I got sick for 4 years, and that was fucking great. I was in the hospital over and over again for 4 years. Um, that culminated in a 2022 heart surgery. So, is she still LDS? I think she still attends, but um, she's a Latter-day Saint in name only. Um, she clearly doesn't believe what the church teaches when it comes to homosexuality and gay shit, or politics or anything else like morally. She's LDS because, well, it pays off for her in the terms of having people to help her. She got remarried and re-divorced. Um, it is what it is. I mean, I have nothing against her. She carts her kid to all of her activities, so I don't really care. She's a good mom. That's the best I could say about it is she's a good mom. She is bi. Why don't you ask her that question? If you find her, why don't you ask her if she's bisexual? That's a question best directed and best answered by her. I don't know what she currently identifies as. I really don't care. Um, I have a kid with her. I protect that kid, and I insist that that kid obey her because she's her mother. How old is my daughter now? Man, you were really, really pushing it. My daughter's going to be 8 this year, and she's lovely. She does not have any of my personality traits. She's not pugnacious and pugilistic. she's she's very sweet. She's the complete opposite of me in that respect. She gets along with everybody, and I barely get along with anybody.
So what's up with the
Is she baptized LDS? I don't know if she's going to be baptized at 8 or not. I don't know. That's her decision. If she chooses to go through with that, obviously that's sad for me, because I'm no longer an active member, and therefore I wouldn't be the priesthood holder to baptize her. And that was kind of the dream, was that I'd have an eternal family. And unfortunately, things didn't work out that way. So, sucks. But her stepfather was not LDS either. He was a good guy, big bear of a dude. Um, and when I first saw him interact with my daughter, he was helping her build a rocket ship out of chairs and couch pillows in the living room, and I thought I hit the jackpot. Um, because you hear a lot of nightmare stories about stepdads,
mhm.
and he was a great stepdad. My kid loves him. She called him Texas Daddy and me Florida Daddy. So it is what it is. I mean, if you're
Right.
looking for me to like shit on these people, Harry, I'm not gonna do it. Like, things didn't work out between me and my ex-wife, and that's unfortunate. But that's water under the bridge. I don't dwell on it. Um, I don't particularly care one way or the other. Do I have a girlfriend now? No, I have a wife now. Um, and my wife is wonderful. So very much happy on that front. Um,
Yeah, what's up with all the personal questions?
you live in Florida? Yeah, this is my permanent residence. I have family land down there, and I have a place down there. Um, but presently, I divide my time between Florida and Utah. Um, so those are the two places I live. So Harry is just playing 20 questions here. Harry is very curious about me. A lot of people are. The sunglasses give me an air of mystery, but my eye is pretty open. I've never been arrested, never been incarcerated. In Utah, I stalk people I've never met, supposedly because I
Yeah.
write about sexual abuse allegations against them. Spring City? No, I would never fucking live there. About half of that town is really, they're good people, and the other half are unbelievably fucked up.
Yeah.
I wouldn't live there. Uh, if somebody gave me property there, I would immediately sell it. There's no way I would ever live there. So,
Nope. There
what
or
else?
knob.
There, Kanab?
Yeah. You couldn't pay me to live in Kanab either.
What are you
Home of
talking about, too?
the
Preston is an ex-con. Well, that's Preston's business. You guys believe in redemption for everybody else, including child rapists. I don't know why you would begrudge Preston a shot at redemption.
right. Besides, if he's an ex-con, he's paid his debt to society. So
Yeah, ex-con.
I mean,
Like,
what does that matter?
it doesn't. It's another little pathetic attempt by some Spring City guy,
Right.
to try and get under my skin or whatever. And it doesn't fucking matter. Like, those people are irrelevant as shit. Will you do an interview with X Mojo? I don't know who the fuck X Mojo is.
News to
Um,
me.
yeah, I don't know who you're talking about. Um, so therefore, I don't know if I do an interview with him. Um, if that's his nomenclature, then his identity is that he's ex-Mormon. And I tend to find those people just as irritating.
Yeah, you know
Um,
what bothers me about the Exmo community is because they talk about the church just as much as a member does. So it seems like they
Yeah.
actually don't leave the church. They
Yeah,
just
the thing of it is, I have nothing but good things to say about Texas Mormons and Florida Mormons. Some of the best people I've ever met in my life. Um, Utah Mormons are a different breed. It's a different church here. But Texas Mormons and Florida Mormons, top notch fucking people. I have nothing but good things to say about my ward family, um, in Texas and Florida. Like, just fantastic people. I'm an
right.
active ex-Mormon. What the
Hmm.
fuck does that even mean? I guess, you know,
Spend a lot of time talking shit on the church, which whatever is fine,
yeah,
I
if
guess.
he's a
But
Spring City ex-Mormon, he's one of those guys who hates the church for opposing gay marriage or abortion or whatever.
right,
I'm sorry that the club wouldn't change its rules to suit your
right.
particular, like, political leanings or whatever.
Like I said, that the ex-Mormon people just bother me because they talk more about the church than people that are usually still in the church. It's like you didn't
There,
leave the church. You're not ex anything.
no shit. You just like won't leave it alone. Like,
Right. It's
I
like
don't
you're supposed to be like
outside.
free now that you left the church. So go do something that's not related to the church.
Outside of the child rape, I don't really have any extra ground with the church. I
Actually, me
don't,
either.
you know, obviously, I don't agree with the church on any number of points about its history and its doctrine.
Sure.
I don't believe polygamy was ever inspired by God. Um, but outside of that, I don't really feel the need to shit on the church for any
Yeah,
reason other
honestly,
than,
I don't really care. I'm with you. I'm outside of the child abuse. I mean, that's my issue right there. Other than that, I don't really care.
Jacob, what is your exposure to the LDS Church? Harry is shifted to you.
I was born and raised in the LDS church. My entire family goes all the way back, even to settling some small towns in southern Idaho. So, on
Holy
both sides of
shit.
my family.
So you're
Yep.
like a pioneer Mormon.
Mm-hmm. Sure am. I left the church when I was 13, though. So,
I was raised Southern Baptist, so my dad was fucking thrilled when I became LDS. Like,
I bet.
he was a Southern Baptist minister. He told me I was a blaspheming heretic and all this other shit. And I just looked at him and said, "Well, you're going to be a dickless ministering angel in the lower two levels of heaven, and I'm going to be a god." I always thought that was like, even when I was Mormon, I had a problem with exaltation because the idea of me being a god,
Right.
that was a stretch. Like, I was going to be happy if I made it into heaven and I got a mop and a bucket and just told, like, you're a janitor here.
Right.
Like, that was about as much as I felt like qualified for.
Right. Right.
I'm going to be a heavenly custodian. You're an ex Mormon talking about the Mormon church, a perfect hypocrite. Look, man, I am an ex Mormon who left the church over the issue of sexual abuse by its members and cover ups by its leadership as it pertained to child rape. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to oppose and talk about, especially when the church insists that it is a bastion of sexual purity and morality. So,
And if he's
if you
talking
want,
about me, technically, I'm still a member in good standing. So,
yeah, yeah, exactly. Fuck you, Harry. Like, like perfect hypocrite. First off, I'm going to be lectured on hypocrisy by somebody who hasn't said a fucking word about an institution that covers up child rape and child sexual abuse.
hmm
Like, you're an ex-Mormon too when you're talking about the church in the comments, Harry. So fuck off. Anything else, Harry? Come on. Come on, Harry. Bring it. At the end of the day, Harry, we're all gonna die. Like that's bottom line is I'm probably gonna die sooner than most. An even bigger hypocrite. Oh, Harry, if you're gonna troll, at least be good at it. Like,
They're not good at it though.
no,
They were
they're
never
not.
taught how to troll properly.
Harry is just getting started. He's on that Mormon time, even though he's an
Mm,
ex-Mormon. Well, he shows up at the end of the podcast and
mhm.
tries to talk shit, but his mouth is constipated. Like, yeah, you're doing all right, Harry. You know, you're kind of like a little retarded kid. You know, you think you're landing more
Right.
shots than you actually are.
I mean, God, to get under my skin, man, you've got to do better than call me a bigger hypocrite or a perfect hypocrite.
This is the whole thing. None of these Mormons or ex-Mormons, none of these TBMs or ex-Mos are busting a grape in a food fight.
Right.
Like none of them. Like
I
they
mean,
always want to sit there and like try to get in your social media or whatever and talk shit. Like they want to do something, and then you sit there and say name the time and place, and oh, I'm not gonna meet up with you. I'm
right.
name the fucking MMA gym or the boxing gym that you want to meet at and get your ass kicked. And I'll show up there. I'm 48 and I'm old and busted. I'm on my last leg, but you know, I know what I'm doing.
Right.
So anytime you want to get it popping, you can. I was hopeful that old Jacob Hansen of Thoughtful Saints would take me up because he got into it with me on YouTube. And he had like some sort of a wrestling match with Jacob Isbell, which he got his ass handed to him. He got choked out by an illegal jump, pansy ass.
That's
And
funny.
he never took me up. He blocked me on Facebook. He didn't want a full on fight. Like, he just wanted to smart off and run his mouth and run off,
Yeah, that's what a lot of them do.
block you. Oh, yeah. Bitch waffles is what I call them. Like, look, man, I'm from LA, Lower Alabama. That's how we settle things.
Right.
Like, how close are you to Salt Lake? Well, how close do you want me to be, Harry? Like, if you have a time and place and you actually want to meet up and get it popping, I mean, like any kind of MMA gym or boxing gym, that's fine. You know, you could put a location up and a date, and it'd probably have to be on a weekend, a few weekends from now. Actually, it'd probably have to be in June, and a lot of shit to do in May. Um, and through the rest of this month. Uh, my kidneys are shitting the bed. Like that's what you get. Like you get a guy who's already dying. So if that's what floats your boat, go ahead. I don't give a shit.
I just I don't understand these people. Um,
Magic Mikey, I'm betting on Goel. Well, Mikey, I'll do my best to make you your money back and then some. Like I'm old and I'm ornery, and that's me at my most dangerous. Like the only good thing about my upbringing is my dad started teaching me to box and grapple at 5 years of age. I'm worried I get charged with your murder. Well, you murdered that sentence in its syntax. I'm worried I get charged with your murder. Fucking Utah public education, man. These people can't fucking write. Like, I'm worried I get
right.
charged with your murder. You're not going to get charged with my murder. You'll get a standing ovation in this state. Like, there are a lot of people in this state
I've always
who'd
wondered
like to
if
kill me.
I've always wondered if these people that criticize if it's literally just the same five people that start new accounts.
Probably. I mean, it's probably some asshole out of Ohio. I forget what his name is, but he showed up on a lot of sock accounts on Facebook and ran his
Right.
mouth.
I mean,
Merrill.
some of these
Merrill
people
Jensen,
are
I think his
hun
name was.
Merrill Jensen. That sounds fake.
Yeah,
Like,
that
what?
was his name. He had a little Eastern European girlfriend who also wanted to talk shit in the comments.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
Passport
So,
bro.
yeah, it's like you're really I don't understand the concept of talking shit online and then not wanting to meet up in person.
Right.
Culturally here, that's pretty normal. How does my name sound fake? Well, Harry, maybe it's real, maybe it isn't. I really don't care. Um,
Yeah, and I
that
wasn't
was
talking about you, but sure, make it about you. Go ahead.
I think Harry makes it about him quite a bit. Uh, that seems to be a common theme among Utah Mormons and ex-Mormons. Is it's always about them.
Right.
Let me ask you something, Harry. Are you opposed to child rape and child sexual abuse? Like I'm waiting on your answer. I'm genuinely asking, are you opposed to child rape and child sexual abuse?
Oh, he broke out the big name, asswipe.
Oh yeah. Yes, you were talking about me, ass wipe.
No,
What do you
Harry,
really
I
think is
was
it
not
like?
talking
Answer
about
the fucking question. Are you opposed to child rape and child sexual abuse, Harry? Like yes or no? Like that's the question I want you to answer. And the fact that you're delayed in answering it is kind of fucking concerning. Um,
so
all
you
told.
bring up a person who is not Harry, and you bring up their name who came up with a bunch of sock accounts on your Facebook to talk shit of who I was talking about, and apparently that means I'm talking about Harry.
Yeah, Harry is.
Are these
Yeah, I'm gonna
people
call you an
brain
ass wipe.
damaged? Like
Yeah,
I
yeah. I think a
they
good many of them are the product of incest.
product of
Little,
incest, no
those
no schooling.
polygamists. Those polygamists. Their genetic legacy has been passed down through the generations. So you get a
Right.
few with an extra chromosome and a few with a missing chromosome or two, and that's how you get somebody like Harry.
I get
That's
it.
what Tim Ballard always alleges. It's not the question I asked, Harry. I don't give a shit about Tim Ballard. Like, I'm
Yeah, that guy's
manifestly opposed
completely
to Tim
irrelevant.
Ballard. Yeah, like, especially now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what is he in Syria now? Or at least that's what he claims. He's
I
in
don't know.
Syria helping the fucking Christian population there. That's what he's trying to grift off of now.
Right.
Um, Syrian Christians being murdered by Muslim militias.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Sounds grifty to me.
yeah. So, Harry, yes or no? Do you oppose child rape and child sexual abuse?
Pretty simple question.
Stop ducking the question, Harry, or I'm just going to block you.
Some of these people, man.
Come on, Harry. Answer the question.
I mean, the fact that he's even given you time at all, I would take him up and answer the fucking question. Like,
He's not going to answer that question because he can't. Well, the whole thing about these like little Satanist people, they have this weird ethos where they feel like they have to tell you the truth
mhm.
or avoid
Revelation of the
telling the
method.
truth. Yeah.
Nope.
I'm not going to answer. Okay, Harry. And that's what I
Well,
want.
refusing to answer actually is an answer. So
Yeah, it's a
He's a
pretty damn
chomo.
good answer.
He's a chomo.
Harry's computer has some things on it that are federal felonies
Oh, I
in
bet.
all
I
likelihood.
bet.
Like that's kind of like the litmus test for a lot of people that I speak to online is
Right.
you ask them that question, and if they can't answer it or they won't answer it,
It's suspicious to
that's
me.
that's all the answer you need to give.
I
Um,
agree 100%. Yeah, choosing to not answer is an answer. So,
yes, as Magic Mikey says, the silence is deafening. It
right.
truly is. Like Harry doesn't want to come out against child abuse and child sexual abuse and child rape. And I wonder why that is.
Yeah, that
Like
that
I
is an
wonder.
odd stance to take, isn't it?
Yeah. Harry has probably an attraction to little girls and boys. In this state, kind of a 50-50 thing.
Mhm.
So my dog is shivering, so I've kangarooed her in my zipped up jacket, which is like her favorite thing. Like Harry, he's not pretending. Don't go away, Harry. Don't go away. I mean, I love fucking with pedophiles. Like I love fucking with chomos. Like especially when they do something to a kid in my presence. That's like a legal grounds to defend that kid from chomos and to beat the dog shit out of them, which
That is
is what
correct.
what chomos deserve. The thing about it is, even the most depraved among us, um, even the most depraved among us, like inmates,
Mm,
incarcerated inmates in the penitentiary, have a sense of morality. They will take you up to the top of the unit
yep.
and drop you off head first. And if you can fly, you can fly, but none of you can.
Yeah, I'm not aware of a single prison where that's not the rule, where pedophiles have to be in protective custody.
You remember that like California inmate who beat the shit out of some pedos with a cane, like murdered them?
Mhm. Yeah.
I actually put money in his commissary. Like, oh, he had some
Good.
ridiculous name like Sol Invictus or something.
Mhm.
And I found him in the California penal system, and I actually filled his comms up.
Nice.
I encouraged other people to, some of my friends did too. I was like, this guy is a fucking American hero.
No kidding.
Like, he's a lifer, and he beat a couple of pedos to death. And I was like, I salute you, sir.
I can't think of a more worthy cause, honestly.
Yeah. I personally think someone should like form a 501c and just use it as a pass through to donate to inmates who kill chomos.
That's why I was super happy to see. Of course, this was overseas, but uh, that guy, what's his name, Ian something. He was the singer of a band. Got
Oh, yeah, the Lost Prophets guy.
yeah, the Lost Prophet singer that got beat to death.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
I
couldn't
was
have happened to a better person.
no kidding, no kidding. And I mean, he was sick among pedophiles too, so
No, I mean
should have
that
happened sooner.
kid's mom deserved every bit of what he got because she was the
Right.
one who delivered like her child up
Yep.
to that guy. Like if I remember it correctly,
Yeah. Well, it
his
was
girlfriend.
some girl that he had met, through him being famous at the time. And yeah, got her kid and then also was able to get other kids for him.
Harry Romo is back in the chat. He asked, "What should happen to Trump?"
Ah,
Well, if you leftists could shoot worth a damn, like what should happen to Trump? I mean,
Yeah, that was all staged.
yeah, it was all
And
staged, but the
his
bottom
I
line is
mean
like,
his his poll numbers are in the dump, so he needed something to kick him up a little bit. Although I don't think this is going to work.
no, no. Like at the end of the day, you guys have had three shots at Trump, and you're too fucking inept to hit him. Like that is not my problem.
I mean, hey,
What should
I'm,
happen to Trump? What's going to happen to Trump? Like when he dies,
yes,
and
should
he,
or is going to. Two different questions.
what should happen is what's going to happen. He's going to hell. Like he's a sack of shit with legs. He's white
Oh yeah,
trash with money.
yep,
Like fuck that guy.
I
I
agree.
didn't vote for him. I didn't vote for him. I don't give a shit who did vote for him. Like
It's not like voting matters, anyways.
I'm old enough to remember like how he was towards his first wife, and like I don't support any of that shit at all. He
Right.
allegedly raped his first wife while he was married to her. Like fuck that guy. Six corporate bankruptcies, all the shit that he did, where he shortchanged contractors who did work. He didn't want to pay them. He's a low class, low character individual. Like at the end of the day, and he said that bit on the airplane that he didn't think he was getting in heaven. Well,
Hmm.
that's because you won't repent and you won't accept Christ. And as a
He's
result, it's
he's
very
he's
simple.
admitted several times he's not a Christian, and boy, do I believe it.
Of course, you believe it because look at his life. Look at the way he
Right.
treats people. Look at the way he is. Like, I don't like a lot of people, but I make an effort
Right.
um, to not show it, although my face betrays me quite a bit. you know, yeah, I live a law-abiding life. I don't drink alcohol, use drugs, or smoke cigarettes, or look at porn, or any of that shit. I do stuff like this. Do live streams on YouTube. I hang out with my dog. I play guitar, and then I research and investigate pedophilia accusations in the Hamlin case and other matters. And gotta say that gets old after a while, like reading about child rape. But I've been doing it for 25 years.
It does get incredibly repetitive. Um,
Yeah,
I mean, I take more of the researching the Satanist aspect, but it's the same thing. You know, lots of child rape, lots of repetitiveness.
Jesus Christ.
Um,
I mean, if there's anything more absurd than a fundamentalist Christian, it's a Satanist.
hmm
Like the amount of certitude that those people, you research Satan, no? Sure, Harry. I research Satan. I read the Bible. You should do the same. Uh, Look, man, like
big fan of the Bible. Big fan.
the reason I don't like fundy Christians is because they're just creepy as shit, and they're sex obsessed people. Utah Mormons are sex obsessed. They can't talk about any other fucking thing. They can't joke about any other thing. Um,
Is weird, isn't it?
oh, it's extremely weird. I mean, if you're having sex, you don't need to talk about it all the time. I'm blessed in that respect in my marriage, that my wife is a good woman and we both find each other attractive. But apparently, there are a bunch of Mormons. The only time they have any kind of sexual release is when they're jerking off to porn or fucking kids.
Ugh.
Like, you guys are perverts. Like, at the end of the day, I'm not saying all of you are, but a significant portion of you are. And if you want to watch another man get his dick sucked or have sex, you're gay as shit as a man.
Well, it's gross too. It's like sitting there watching from the cuck chair, but you're watching drug addicts have sex. That's what watching porn is, because they're all
Yeah,
drug addicts, all of them.
they're all. any number of things. Like the sad part is, I'm sure a lot of them, given their hypersexuality, were probably abused as kids,
Mm-hmm.
and all as I understand it, like all the male actors start out in gay porn. That's how they break
Yep.
into that demonic industry.
Right. You have to, whether you're gay or not. You have to
Oh,
go
you're
through gay.
gay. You're gay.
Right.
You suck a dick. You're fucking gay. Like, yeah, you're gay. And I don't believe anybody's like gay or straight or bisexual or anything. I believe you choose who you have sex with. It's not this overwhelming compulsion one way or the other.
Right.
Because, I turned down a lot of fat chicks when I was a heathen, no matter how hard up I was. If I wasn't attracted to you, I wasn't having sex. Um, and that was back in my reprobate days. So, that was before I came to Christ. And ultimately, if I could exercise, free will and discernment, I don't believe in this bullshit that, you know, have you witnessed such? What are you talking about, Harry? Such what? Like,
Right.
this guy specializes in vague questions that really aren't questions at all. Like, what the hell's wrong with you? Excellent show, guys. Thank you for your insights. Speaking great. Favor over all victims and the warriors to speak up for them. Well, thank you so much, PJ McCord. Thanks for watching.
Yep.
And thanks for the kind words. We're short a guy. I'm sure Riggs would have appreciated the kind words. You know, Riggs, damn, the guy, he comes up with some wild shit on LES abuse in terms of like tangents that he goes off on, but damn if he isn't a good researcher. Like,
Hmm.
all of his shit is meticulous.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's very impressed. One of my favorite follows for sure.
Yeah, every time I get on Twitter, I just look forward to all of his stuff in my feed.
Oh yeah.
Like, he's always gonna have like these really thought-provoking threads. My only beef with him is that he entertains people who are arguing in bad faith as opposed to blocking them.
Right.
This Chalkum Chirrut dude that he's been going back and forth with lately.
Ah, like the fucking white haired guy. Yeah.
Yeah, that guy, when I
That's one of the
read,
rabbit holes I went down going and digging through all of his stuff.
like what that guy types, just the paragraphs of just the most pompous, pretentious
Right.
bullshit. Like it takes him forever to get to a point, and then when he does get to a point, it's incredibly stupid.
Right.
So I'm not gonna waste my time on this, and I blocked him. But Justin has a soft heart for retards on the internet.
Justin is a good person, and you know what? I
He's
commend
just
him
more
for that.
like he's more compassionate than I am. My
Same.
wife is that way. Like
Same.
my wife has endless patience for stupid people. Like,
Yeah,
and I just don't.
I don't. I mean, I might tolerate it for a second, but eventually I'm gonna get real tired of it.
Yeah. So he
Because
came with a
I mean,
video about you during this podcast. Uh, I don't
what?
I don't know what you're talking about here. He came with a video about you during this podcast. Who? Who came with the video?
What
Please
video?
try to make some semblance of sense, Harry. Otherwise, I'm going to have to block you because you're starting to
I
irritate
mean,
me.
this is what I'm talking about. It's like in this day and age, stupid is a choice. So,
And Harry is choosing stupid with every comment. So Harry, you got one more strike, and then I'm gonna like remove you from the chat. So what video are you talking about, and who posted it?
yeah, and who's he? He? What video? Like this
Yeah.
podcast, this episode, or like this podcast, Goel? Like what? Okay. No, no answers to anything. Very
Came
vague.
out with this. What the fuck is he talking about?
He came out with this.
And it's got a bunch of like
Arrows
upvoted
pointing up.
pictures.
Yeah. He
Harry,
came out with this.
who is he? Pronouns have antecedents at some point, Harry. Like, I don't know who he is.
Yeah.
Harry, you're dangerously close to being removed from the chat. I'm trying to be merciful here. I understand you might be a little intellectually challenged. You might be a chomo who can't answer that if you're opposed to child rape or not.
It's
That was
really
your first
scary.
strike.
Really scary he wouldn't answer that.
Oh, it's not scary. It's just, so the thing about these people, they think they're in a relationship with a kid. Like that's
Right.
like the number of them that I've spoken to fall back on it. Like I would never hurt a child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're in a
Yeah,
relationship.
no,
I'm
I
like,
love that.
no, you can't be in a relationship as an adult male
Mm-hmm.
with an 8 or 9 or 10 year old. What the
Yeah.
fuck is wrong with you?
Sorry. Children can't consent. Like
You know,
that's
you,
just it's not a thing.
synapses aren't firing. You know, you realize that there are people in this world who are too stupid to be alive, and child rapists are in that category.
Yes.
Like, it's not a punishment execution, it's a mercy killing. Like, the fuck?
uh,
When you sit there and you talk with these people, a lot of people are creeped out. I'm just really kind of, all right, there's just no point you being alive. Like, you're just gonna keep doing this dumb shit, and you
there's different
genuinely,
classes of pedophiles though. I mean, there's the occultists, there's the human traffickers, then there's your dumb everyday pedophiles that get swooped up by people like all those online predator catchers, like
Mhm.
predator poachers or whatever. You've got these different levels of pedophiles.
like, how fucking retarded can you be? Like,
Right.
to talk with a 13-year-old online or something as a grown man, like, how retarded and how desperate can you be that that's what you're going for
Right.
online?
Right.
Like, first off, to trust anybody online is epically stupid. I mean, when I discovered Tinder after my divorce, that was the greatest trolling app ever invented. Uh, I used to send I used to send women that I matched up with because they were all like sex obsessed. I was never going to have anything to do with them. They
Right.
always led with sex. And they're all these thirsty chicks. And I would send them to the cemetery in Panama City. There's this part of it called the Ferry Circle. And there's an actual address to it in Google. You can actually
Interesting.
direct them to it. And the number of angry messages that I got after, like, did you not plug that into the map and see where it was? It's in a cemetery, you dumbass. But apparently, when you're horny, you're just stupid. And
Yes. Yeah.
so I used to troll them in that respect and send them like just weird addresses. And then they would get there
Very
and
good.
they'd be so enraged because they weren't going to get any. Like, how could you do that? You'll never meet another woman like I meet women like you on these apps
Right.
all the time, and I wouldn't touch you with somebody else's dick. You're on Tinder, like the worst place to meet somebody.
No kidding. No kidding.
Like it
Well,
was just,
I've got to
I,
take off. I've got some other work to do. But I want to thank you for having me on, and honestly, I'm excited for the next. So
Yeah, definitely. Maybe Harry will show up to the next one.
I hope he
Harry, we might
does. I
we'll
hope
see
he
you in
does.
like, 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, however long it takes us to be open on each other's schedules, and we'll have another stimulating podcast episode, and Harry will show up and type in inane banalities in the chat, and we'll tolerate it because Harry's slightly retarded. Like, good night, Harry. Good night, Jacob. Thanks for being on.
Yeah,
We'll talk to you
anytime.
next time.
Yep. Good
This
talking to you, and
conclude
I'll talk to you soon.
this concludes our episode. It's been the Triumvirate, episode 101. We'll talk to y'all later.